Hi guys, and welcome to Quiet Voice Podcast channel. Tonight we step into the rain-dark world of Georgia plantation quarters in 1835, where thunder walks slowly over the pine woods and firelight trembles inside a little cabin. What does safety mean when the night is loud, the roof is thin, and the world outside belongs to someone else? You hear the storm gathering beyond the fields, smelling wet earth, wood smoke, and the faint sweetness of cornmeal near the hearth. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while the rain begins to tap softly at the walls, comment where you are listening from and what your local time is. Perhaps it is midnight in London, dawn in Manila, or a quiet evening somewhere in Georgia itself. The fire lowers its voice, the storm lifts its own. Now, dim the lights, and you are walking the narrow, muddy path toward the quarters, with rain pressing cool fingers against your face. The first thunder does not crack all at once. It rolls, broad and tired, across the low fields. You feel it under your bare feet, through the wet ground and packed red clay. The air is heavy with summer damp, though the storm has cooled the evening. Pine trees lean at the edge of the plantation, their black shapes shivering whenever lightning opens the sky. For one pale second, the cabins appear together, small and dark, with smoke bending from their chimneys. Then the world closes again. You move toward the nearest glow, careful in the slick mud. The quarters are not arranged for beauty, though beauty still finds cracks to enter. Cabins stand in a rough line, built for usefulness, watchfulness, and control. Some are made from logs with clay pressed between the gaps. Others carry rough boards that have weathered under sun, rain, and years of hard handling. In Georgia, during the 1830s, large cotton plantations are spreading their power through the landscape, and enslaved labour sits at the centre of that wealth. That is the plain historical truth beneath the sleepy rain. Yet the night does not speak in numbers first. It speaks in small sounds. A baby gives one sleepy protest from inside a cabin. Someone laughs softly, then hushes themselves. A pot lid clicks against iron. A mule shifts somewhere beyond the dark, annoyed by weather, which is fair enough. Even animals have opinions about thunderstorms. You smell damp wool, ash, sweat, pine smoke, and cooked greens lingering in the air. The storm draws every scent close, as though the whole quarters have been wrapped in a wet blanket. You reach the cabin doorway and pause beneath the low overhang. Rain drips steadily from the edge of the roof. It lands beside your ankle with a patient rhythm. The door is made of planks, not quite even, and the latch feels smooth from many hands. Inside, the fire has been banked and stirred again, coaxed into a deeper orange. The hearth is the centre of the room, not just for cooking, but for heat, light, gathering, and a little comfort. It gives what it can. It asks for constant feeding. A woman near the fire looks up as you enter. Her face is tired, but her eyes are awake. In this place, tiredness and watchfulness learn to live together. She shifts a piece of wood with a stick, and sparks rise like small, nervous stars. The smoke climbs unevenly, finding the chimney with some difficulty. Rain ticks on the roof above you, sounding almost gentle now that you're inside. The walls hold back the weather, though not perfectly. A thread of wind slips between the logs and touches your neck. You sit where someone makes room for you. The floor is hard beneath you, packed earth worn smooth by feet. Near one wall, a rough bed frame stands low and practical. Along another, folded cloth and tools sit in careful order. Nothing here is accidental. Every object has earned its place. A gourd dipper hangs from a peg. A broom made from tied twigs rests by the wall. A small bundle, perhaps herbs or scraps of cloth, has been tucked above the doorway. Maybe it is only storage. Maybe it is protection. That is one of the quiet uncertainties of this world. Scholars still debate how often African spiritual practices Christian belief and local folk customs blended inside plantation quarters. The records are uneven, often written by people who never understood what they saw. Some signs were hidden on purpose. Some meanings changed from one family to another. So you do not pretend to know everything. You simply notice the bundle, the doorway, the fire, and the way no one mentions it. The storm grows louder, and the cabin seems to breathe with it. Wind presses against the wall, then releases. Rain comes in hard waves across the roof. You hear drops finding weak places overhead, then falling into a wooden bowl set carefully beneath them. Plink, plink, plink. A very small orchestra, but not an especially talented one. Still, its rhythm belongs to the room now. The people inside accept it, as they accept many inconveniences, because argument with a leaking roof rarely produces roofing repairs. A child sits close to an older man, knees drawn under a thin shirt. The old man rubs his hands near the fire, warming his knuckles. His palms are deeply lined, and clay dust seems to live permanently in the creases. When lightning flashes, his face appears carved from bronze and shadow. He begins speaking in a low voice, not quite telling a story yet, more testing the room. His words move slowly. The rain fills the spaces between them. You listen, feeling your own breathing settle. Outside, the storm is enormous. Inside, everything is small and near. The warmth touches your shins first, then your hands. Your back remains cool where the wind reaches. The fire smells sharp when resin in the pine catches, then sweet when older wood settles into coals. Smoke stings your eyes a little. You blink and let them water. No one makes a fuss. Smoke has been part of human evenings for a very long time. A mainstream visitor might look at this cabin and see poverty only. Poverty is certainly here, plain as the patched cloth and thin bedding. But if you sit quietly, you begin to see organisation, memory, and skill. The hearth has been arranged to keep heat through the night. Food has been saved with care. Children know where to sit and when to be silent. Adults listen not just to one another, but to the weather, the animals, and the wider plantation. Survival has its own architecture. The woman by the fire turns a small cake of cornmeal near the heat. It browns slowly on a flat iron surface. Corn was a common staple in many quarters, along with vegetables grown in small garden patches when time and permission allowed. In some places, enslaved people tended little plots near their cabins, raising greens, beans, peppers, or herbs. That fact carries both hardship and agency together. It tells of hunger, but also knowledge. It tells of control, but also care. The smell of the corn cake thickens in the room. Your stomach notices before your mind does. Beside the hearth, a pot holds something darker, perhaps greens cooked down with a little fat or seasoning saved from earlier. The steam rises with a mineral scent, earthy and plain. Food after sunset is not a feast, it is repair. It is the body being told, very softly, you have reached the end of this day. Not freedom, not ease, just this small pause. Thunder shakes the cabin again, and the child flinches. The older man clicks his tongue gently, not scolding, just steadying. He says the sky's only moving furniture. Someone smiles at that, because the sky must own very heavy chairs. The joke is small, but it works. Even in a room shaped by exhaustion, humour slips under the door like a clever cat. It belongs wherever people refuse to let sorrow have every chair by the fire. A quirky tidbit lingers in the glow of such evenings. In parts of the American South, people sometimes believed that thunder could sour milk, spoil eggs, or disturb certain foods. Beliefs like these travelled through kitchens, cabins, and farmyards, mixing observation with imagination. Perhaps the storm did spoil something now and then, thanks to heat, timing, or plain bad luck. but Thunder received the blame because Thunder was loud enough to seem guilty. You can almost respect that. It makes an impressive suspect. The rain becomes steadier now. It no longer attacks the roof. It settles into a deep surrounding hush. The cabin feels more enclosed, as though the storm has drawn a curtain around the quarters. You hear another cabin door open somewhere nearby, then close quickly. Voices pass through the rain as muffled shapes. Someone calls a name. Someone answers. The sound matters. In darkness and bad weather, knowing who is near can be its own comfort. You look toward the doorway. Water has begun to creep under the threshold, making a dark line across the floor. A young person pushes a rag against it with one foot. No speech is needed. The gesture has been done many times. The rag darkens. The floor shines faintly. The fire snaps once, loudly, and everyone glances toward it. Sparks tumble, then vanish. There is safety here, but it is not simple safety. The fire protects against chill and darkness. The walls soften the storm. The presence of others steadies the heart. Yet beyond the cabin, the plantation remains itself. There are rules, punishments, duties waiting with the morning. There are people whose power reaches into the night. You feel that truth without needing it shouted. It sits behind the warmth, like a cold stone under a blanket. Still, human beings are not only what is done to them. Inside the cabin, you feel how people make an evening from what they have. A mother adjusts a child's damp sleeve. A man repairs a strap by firelight, pulling thread through leather with slow patience. Someone hums under their breath, almost too soft to hear. The tune bends around the rain. It might be a hymn, a work song, or something older in its bones. Songs often carried more history than paper allowed. The storm gives the night a strange privacy. Rain covers small noises. Thunder interrupts distant ones. The overseer's house, the barns, the fields, the big house. All seem farther away for a while. Not gone. Never gone. But blurred. The cabin's fire becomes the strongest fact your eyes can hold. Flame curls around a blackened log. Coals pulse red beneath grey ash. Shadows move slowly across faces, making everyone appear both present and dreamlike. You begin to understand why the hearth matters so much. It is not decorative. It is timekeeper, kitchen, lamp, heater, and gathering place. It is where wet clothes, steam, and stories begin. It is where a child learns which faces mean comfort. It is where tired adults speak softly because the day has taken the loudness from them. The hearth cannot change the plantation, but it can create a circle. Sometimes a circle is enough for 1 hour. Lightning flashes, and for that instant you see the room clearly. The rough grain of the wall logs, the hanging pothook, the patched blanket, the shine of rain on the threshold, the tired eyes, the careful hands. Then the thunder follows, closer now, rolling like barrels over a wooden bridge. The child does not flinch this time. The old man notices and says nothing. Some lessons arrive without speeches. The woman lifts the corn cake away from the fire. She breaks it into pieces with practiced fingers. The surface is crisp, the inside soft and hot. When a piece reaches your hand, it warms your palm through the brief pain of heat. You breathe over it before tasting. Smoke, corn, salt, and ash meet your tongue. Simple food can feel enormous when rain is loud and the night is long. You eat slowly, because there is no reason to hurry this bite. Around you, the room loosens. Shoulders drop. The storm still speaks, but it has become part of the evening rather than an enemy. A drip finds the bowl. A log collapses inward. Someone murmurs thanks, though you cannot tell whether it is meant for food, fire, company, or the stubborn fact of still being here. Perhaps it is meant for all of them. Perhaps gratitude in such a place has to be broad enough to hold contradictions. The older man begins his story at last. His voice is low, roughened by work and age, and the rain makes a soft wall around it. He speaks of a road that disappears in wet weather, of a traveller who follows a blue flame, of a clever animal who fools a larger one. The details shift as he speaks, because spoken stories are alive. They stretch, curl, and settle differently each time. The listeners know this. Nobody interrupts the magic by demanding consistency. You lean back against the wall, feeling the chill of damp clay through your shirt. The fire warms only one side of you, so you turn slightly, like bread near the coals. Outside, the wind moves through the trees with a rushing sound. Inside, the storyteller pauses at just the right moments. Even the rain seems polite enough to soften then. This is not silence. It is attention. The night in the quarters is crowded with truths. It holds oppression, labour, fear, tenderness, invention, hunger, laughter, and memory. It holds the ordinary human desire to be dry, warm, and near someone who knows your name. History often arrives dressed as battles, presidents, dates, and documents. But here, history sits close to the hearth with wet feet. It smells of smoke. It listens for thunder. It breaks corn cake into careful pieces. As the storm settles deeper over Georgia, your eyes grow heavier. The cabin walls shine faintly where moisture has gathered. The bowl under the leak keeps counting time. The fire lowers itself into coals, no longer leaping, but breathing steadily. Faces soften at the edges. The child's head tilts against the old man's arm. The woman watches the doorway a moment longer, then looks back to the hearth. You remain near the warmth, feeling the strange shelter of this room. Not safe in the full sense. Not free from sorrow, but held, for now, within a circle of firelight, rain, voices, and breathing bodies. The thunder moves farther away, grumbling like it has lost interest. The quarters rest under the storm, fragile and enduring. You listen until the rain becomes almost like sleep itself, falling gently over the roof, the path, the fields, and the long dark earth. You step farther into the cabin's quiet world, where every board, peg, and packed corner carries the mark of tired hands. The storm still presses around the dwelling, but the room itself asks you to notice its making, not its prettiness, because prettiness was never the purpose here. Its stubborn usefulness, its ability to stand through heat, rain, cold, smoke, crowding, and the long pressure of plantation life. The walls are made of rough pine logs, cut and stacked with a practical eye. Between them, clay and moss have been pushed into the open spaces, sealing the room against wind as well as anyone could manage. That sealing is called chinking, a plain word for a plain necessity. In many enslaved quarters across the South, cabins were often built from timber close at hand, with clay, mud, and plant fibre filling the gaps. The materials came from the landscape, and the labour came from people already worked too hard. You reach out and touch the wall. The wood is uneven beneath your fingers. Some places are smooth from shoulders brushing past over years. Other places catch at your skin with splinters that have not learned manners. The clay between the logs feels cool and faintly damp. It smells of earth, smoke, rain, and something mineral. The storm has awakened the walls, drawing scent from every crack. The cabin is small, yet it contains many lives. That is the first thing your body understands. You do not need a ruler. You feel it in how carefully people move around one another. A knee shifts to let a child pass. A hand lifts a pot before someone's elbow reaches it. A sleeping place is not just a sleeping place. During daylight, it becomes storage, seating, repair space, and sometimes a corner for grief. The roof above you is made from wooden shingles, or perhaps split boards weighted by age and weather. It does not meet the storm with confidence. It negotiates. Rain touches it, tests it, finds weaknesses, and slips through in patient drops. A few dark stains show where old leaks have marked the ceiling beams. Someone has tucked scraps into a troublesome seam. Someone else has placed a bowl beneath another. Architecture, here, is less a finished object than a running conversation with inconvenience. A gust arrives hard enough to make the door tremble. The latch lifts slightly, then settles. The cabin answers with creaks. Each sound has a different character. The roof groans softly. The wall pops where wet wood swells. The door gives a dry little complaint. You begin to hear the structure as people here must have heard it, not as background noise, but as information. A new sound may mean trouble. A familiar sound may mean shelter is still holding. Near the hearth, clay has been packed and baked by repeated heat. The fireplace is crude, but central. Fire has blackened the stones and earth around it. Smoke has painted the chimney throat a deep, dull soot. In some cabins, chimneys were made from sticks and clay, often called mud and stick chimneys. They could work well enough, but they also needed care. A chimney that cracked or dried badly could become dangerous. Fire is a friend with sharp teeth. The smell is layered. Wet pine from the walls, ash from old fires, sour damp cloth, cornmeal stored in a covered vessel, a faint trace of tallow from a small light saved for necessity. Human closeness, too, warm and plain. Modern noses are often spoiled little aristocrats, expecting every room to smell like nothing. This room smells like use. It smells like labour brought indoors. It smells like survival trying to stay dry. You notice how few possessions are visible. That does not mean there is no private world here. Privacy has simply been folded, tucked, hidden, and carried in memory. A bundle of cloth rests near the bed. A wooden spoon lies beside a bowl. A small knife, carefully kept, glints near the hearth. A basket sits beneath the stool, its weave tight and neat. Such things are not clutter. They are wealth in a place where wealth has been violently denied. There is a mainstream fact that lives inside these walls. Many enslaved people in the plantation south were housed in simple cabins grouped into quarters, often near enough for oversight and labour organisation. The design of these quarters varied by region. Plantation wealth, crop, and the owner's choices. Some dwellings were slightly better built. Many were badly ventilated, crowded, cold in winter, and stifling in summer. A roof could stand above you and still fail to give comfort. Yet the people inside often reshaped these spaces. A shelf added here, a peg driven there, a blanket hung to divide a corner, a hidden pocket cut into bedding. These changes could be tiny, but tiny does not mean meaningless. You feel that as you look around, the cabin may have been built to contain labourers. The people living here made it hold relationships, habits, skills, and memory. That difference matters. A woman kneels near a low chest, opening it only a little. The hinges complain in a faint metallic whisper. Inside, folded cloth rests beside a few treasured items, perhaps a kerchief, perhaps a child's garment saved for mending, perhaps something given by a relative on another plantation. In this world, objects travel with emotional weight. A scrap of fabric may remember a mother's hands. A bead may remember a market day. A broken cup may still belong to someone. Historians continue to discuss how much control enslaved people could exercise over the interiors of their cabins. Some evidence comes from archaeology, some from written accounts, some from later memories. The record is uneven because the people who lived these lives were often denied the chance to document them fully. So the room teaches through fragments: a nail, a seed, a pipe stem, a button beneath floor dirt. Small evidence can speak softly, but it speaks. You lower yourself onto a three-legged stool, and it wobbles just enough to humble you. The seat is worn smooth and slightly shiny from use. Someone made it to solve a problem, not to impress a furniture maker. Still, there is skill in its balance. One leg has been shaved shorter to match the uneven floor. Another has been wedged with a sliver of wood. The stool is doing its best. Honestly, many people do less. Near the doorway, a broom leans with its handle polished by palms. It may be made from twigs, straw, or broom corn, tied tight and trimmed. Sweeping a packed earth floor does not produce perfection. It produces order. Fine dust rises and settles again. Mud returns with every footstep. Children scatter crumbs. Firewood sheds bark. Yet the act matters. Sweeping marks the difference between a room abandoned to hardship and a room claimed by care. The floor itself is not silent. When your heel presses into it, you feel hardness layered over softness. Packed earth holds warmth near the fire and cold near the door. It can turn dusty and dry weather and slick where rain sneaks inside. In some quarters, wooden floors existed, especially on wealthier plantations or in later structures. Here, the earth underfoot keeps you aware that the cabin is close to the ground. The land has not been fully shut out. A child traces a line in the dirt with one finger, then rubs it away. The gesture is idle, but it catches your attention. Writing, drawing, marking, erasing. In 1835, Georgia, laws and customs worked hard to restrict literacy among enslaved people because reading could threaten the system that held them. Even so, knowledge moved. It moved through memory, whispered lessons, Bible verses heard aloud, marks made in secret, and songs shaped to carry meaning. Control was never the same as total silence. A quirky detail sits near the hearth, almost hidden. A small piece of blue glass has been tucked into a crack in the wall. Maybe it is accidental. Maybe a child liked its shine. Maybe it relates to a broader belief, found in many parts of the South, that blue glass, beads, or paint could offer protection against harmful spirits. Such beliefs changed across communities and time. You do not force one meaning onto it. You let the blue glimmer remain mysterious. Lightning flashes again, and the glass catches it. For one breath, the tiny piece shines like captured sky. Then it returns to darkness. The moment is brief, but the room seems larger for it. Beauty does not need permission. It can hide in a wall crack, waiting for thunderclouds to lend it a little drama. Very generous of the weather, really, after making such a mess outside. You look toward the sleeping area. The bed frame is rough, made from boards and posts. The bedding may be stuffed with straw, corn shucks, moss, or whatever could be gathered and kept clean enough. A woven cover lies folded near the foot, patched in several colours. It is not merely warm, it is evidence of repair. Every patch says that something was saved rather than thrown away. Every stitch says time was found where time was scarce. The cabin's single room offers little separation between generations. Adults speak, children listen, sleepers turn, tools wait, food cools, and wet garments steam near the fire. Life overlaps because space demands it. A cough belongs to everyone. A whispered worry may travel farther than intended. A laugh, too, spreads quickly. Crowding can weary the spirit, but it can also create a net of awareness. No one disappears entirely in such a room. Outside, rainwater runs along the path between cabins, carving shining channels in the clay. Through a gap near the door, you glimpse the yard for a moment. A barrel stands beneath the roof edge, catching runoff. A chopping block sits dark and wet. Firewood has been stacked under a slanted cover, though the outer pieces have already soaked through. Wood smoke from neighbouring chimneys lies low in the rain, drifting like tired fog. The quarters smell alive. Inside, someone shifts a hanging cloth to block a draught. The fabric moves gently, making the room feel divided for a moment. Behind it may be stored clothing, tools, or a sleeping child. That cloth is not a wall, but it creates a boundary. Boundaries matter deeply when so much has been taken. A person needs a corner, a box, a cloth, a song, something that can mean mine or ours, even when the law denies it. You notice the cabin is not only shelter from weather, it is shelter from being constantly seen. Imperfect shelter, yes, but still precious. In the fields, movement is watched. At work, pace is judged. Near the big house, posture may be examined. Here, glances soften a little, a shoulder slumps, a face becomes private again. Someone can rub aching feet without performing obedience. Someone can close their eyes without being useful. The fire throws light against the ceiling beams. Shadows tremble across the rough wood, making the cabin appear to sway like a boat. The comparison feels right. This small dwelling is crossing a difficult night, carrying its people through darkness and rain. It is not graceful. It leaks. It smokes. It creaks. Yet it floats, in its own landlocked way, on a wide black sea of storm. A man by the wall works at a loose peg, twisting it deeper into the wood. From it hangs a small cloth bag. You do not ask what is inside. Dried herbs, perhaps, a needle and thread, a few seeds, something religious, something ordinary. The boundary between ordinary and sacred is not always clear in a world where both must fit into the same small bag. Practical things can become protective through use. The storm lowers for a while, giving space to indoor sounds, a child's breathing, the soft scrape of a pot being moved, the tiny crackle of bark catching fire, rain dripping from clothing near the hearth. Your own sleeve clings coldly to your arm, and when you bring it closer to the heat, steam rises with the smell of wet cloth. The warmth is uneven, but welcome. Your fingers begin to loosen. This cabin is not romantic. It should not be softened into a cosy picture that forgets why it exists. It was part of a system built on forced labour and stolen choice. Yet it also should not be flattened into misery alone. People lived here. They arranged, cooked, rested, argued, remembered, teased, worried, sang, and slept. They built small interiors of meaning inside conditions meant to reduce them. That truth deserves gentleness and clarity together. You sit quietly, letting the cabin teach at its own pace. The rough pine walls hold rain shadows. The clay seams hold thumbprints from past repairs. The hearth holds heat gathered from the day's final strength. Objects rest in corners like sleeping witnesses. A spoon, a basket, a broom, a folded cloth. Nothing grand, nothing wasted. The room feels poor in possessions, rich in traces, and heavy with lives that history too often tried to number instead of know. The thunder now sounds farther away, but the rain continues. It washes the roof, the yard, the paths, and the fields beyond. Inside, the air remains smoky and warm near the hearth, cold and damp near the walls. You feel both at once. That is the cabin's honest lesson. Comfort and hardship share the same floor. Shelter and confinement use the same walls. Firelight and shadow lean together, neither one able to drive the other out completely. As your eyes adjust, the room becomes less strange. You begin to know where the roof leaks, where the stool wobbles, where the wind slips through, where the blue glass waits. You sense how each person moves within the tight space with practiced awareness. The cabin is small, but its meanings are not. It is a place of clay and pine, smoke and rain, fatigue and repair. It is a dwelling made under constraint, then remade each night by human presence. You rest your palm against the wall one final time. The wood feels cool now, breathing storm damp through its grain. Somewhere inside it, sap once rose in a living tree. Now it holds a family's weather, their whispered evenings, and their careful arrangements against the world. The fire glows behind you. The rain speaks above you, and the cabin stands, imperfect and necessary. Holding the night together one clay-filled seam at a time, you sit close enough to the hearth to feel supper becoming the centre of the room. The storm has softened the yard into mud, and the cabin has turned inward. Evening food is not served with ceremony. It arrives in gestures, in shared bowls, in fingers careful around heat, in quiet decisions about who receives which portion. The day has already taken much from everybody here, so supper moves gently, without wasting breath. A pot hangs above the coals, dark from years of smoke. Its iron sides hold heat with stubborn loyalty. Steam lifts from the rim and carries the smell of greens, corn, onion, and a little fat if fortune has been generous. The scent is humble, but it fills the room like a promise. You feel your hunger wake slowly, as if it had been too tired to speak earlier. Now it has opinions, quite direct ones. A woman stirs with a wooden spoon worn smooth along the handle. She does not stir because the food needs drama. It needs not to burn. The fire can be useful, but it has no sense of fairness. A little too much flame beneath the pot, and the bottom will scorch. A little too little, and everyone waits longer with tired stomachs. Cooking over embers requires attention, patience, and the ability to forgive smoke for being deeply annoying. In the plantation south, enslaved people often received rations such as cornmeal, pork, or fish, though amounts and quality varied widely. Many also relied on small gardens, foraging, hunting, fishing, and exchange within their communities. That mainstream fact matters because supper was never only about eating. It was about stretching limited supplies, adding flavour where possible, and turning unequal rations into a meal that could carry people into morning. You watch a young man bring in a covered basket from a dry corner. He lifts the cloth to reveal small pieces of bread made from cornmeal. Some are round and flat, cooked close to the hearth. Others are thicker, uneven, and browned at the edges. Corn appears again and again in this world because it's practical, filling, and familiar. It can be boiled, baked, fried, pounded, stirred, or made into something plain enough to survive almost anything. The bread is passed first toward the oldest woman in the room. She accepts without comment, because dignity does not always need words. Her hands are thin, with swollen joints that make each movement careful. She breaks the piece and gives part to a child beside her. The child watches her face before eating. Children learn fairness from such gestures before anyone names it. They learn hunger too. Unfortunately, hunger is a very pushy teacher. Rain rattles harder for a moment, and the steam from the pot wavers in the draught. Someone shifts a board near the door to slow the incoming water. Another person reaches for a wooden bowl, wiping it with a cloth that has already worked many jobs. The bowl passes from hand to hand. No one owns the meal alone. The room leans toward the pot, not greedily, but with the shared focus of people who have earned every spoonful. You take what is given, feeling the bowl's heat against your palms. The food smells green, smoky, and faintly salty. A bite warms your mouth, simple and deep. The greens have cooked down until they're tender, carrying the taste of the pot itself. The cornbread is coarse against your tongue. It breaks apart, catching broth, making the meal thicker. It is not luxurious. It is enough for this hour. Enough can feel almost holy. Around the hearth, the mood loosens by a small degree. Supper gives permission to speak. A man complains softly about a mule with more stubbornness than sense. Someone says the mule likely feels the same about him. A few smiles appear, quick and tired. Gentle sarcasm is safest when it aims at animals, weather, or tools, because none of them report conversations. The mule, to be fair, might report if properly bribed with corn. A girl near the wall picks at her food slowly, trying to hide sleepiness. Her head dips, then lifts. The older woman nudges her knee, not sharply, just enough. Eat first, sleep later. The order matters. Night rest without food can turn thin and restless. A warm meal, however modest, helps the body believe it has not been completely forgotten. You feel that belief settle around the room with the smoke. In some quarters, enslaved people prepared meals late because daylight hours belonged mostly to forced labour. After field work, there might still be chores, childcare, washing, tending gardens, mending clothing, or caring for the sick. Supper belonged to the narrow space left over. That is why the rhythm here feels both weary and efficient. No one moves slowly because time is plentiful. They move carefully because energy is scarce. The storm makes cooking harder, of course. Wet wood smokes more than it burns. Damp kindling resists flame like a stubborn little aristocrat. Smoke pushes back into the room, causing eyes to sting and throats to tighten. A child coughs once, then buries their face against a sleeve. Someone adjusts the wood, opening a small pocket of air beneath the embers. The fire brightens reluctantly, as if offended by competence. A smell rises from the corner where wet shoes or foot rags have been placed near warmth. It mingles with food, ash, damp cloth, and bodies. The result is not delicate, yet it is real, and reality has its own depth. You feel the cabin's atmosphere thicken with human closeness. Steam beads along a wooden surface. Smoke curls in a slow ribbon. Rain drums above, steady and full, as though the sky has settled into its task. A quirky supper custom appears in the way someone saves a small crust near the hearth. Not thrown away, not eaten immediately, just placed aside. In many rural communities, bits of bread, grease, bones, or pot liquor might be saved for animals, flavouring, children, or a later hunger that everyone knew would come. There were also folk sayings about dropped food, shared salt, and unlucky spills. A pinch of salt wasted could invite scolding far beyond its size. Salt had value, and superstition had excellent memory. You notice a small gourd cup being passed after the bowls. Water tastes faintly of wood and earth. Perhaps it came from a spring, a well, or rain collected nearby. It is cool enough to refresh your mouth after the smoky food. The cup's rim is smooth from use, and everyone drinks with a practical trust of shared necessity. In a crowded cabin, intimacy is not always sentimental. Sometimes it's simply drinking from the same cup because that is the cup. Conversation gathers in pieces. A woman mentions a child on another plantation, and the room quiets around her words. Family separation is not an abstract cruelty here. It is a wound with names, yet the woman does not let the wound take over supper. She speaks the name, holds it briefly in the warm air, then returns to the pot. The others receive the name without pressing. This too is care. Not every sorrow wants questioning. Historians still disagree about how often enslaved families could maintain stable evening meals together across different plantations. Work routines, household assignments, sale, hiring out, punishment, and distance all shaped daily life. Some people ate with kin often. Others struggled to gather at all. The records rarely preserve the full texture of these nights, so you listen for the uncertainty inside the ordinary act of sharing food. A bowl can hold more history than it shows. The old man near the fire takes a piece of cornbread and crumbles it into broth. He waits until it softens, then eats with slow concentration. His teeth may trouble him. His hands may ache. The room adjusts around his pace without announcing that it has done so. This is one of the quiet skills of community. People learn who needs the softer piece, who needs the larger sip, who pretends not to need anything. Pride has to be handled gently. A boy is sent to check a covered pot placed just outside the door, where the rain has cooled it. He opens the door only a crack, and wet wind rushes in, making the fire lean sideways. Everyone complains at once without really meaning it. The boy grins, grabs the pot and shuts the door with his shoulder. The room warms again. The pot contains something saved from earlier, maybe beans or a thin stew. Supper expands by small miracles. You feel the texture of the meal changing as each addition arrives. A spoonful of beans thickens the bowl. A scrap of fat deepens the greens. A pepper, if one has been grown nearby and dried, might lend heat. The people here understand flavour as both pleasure and strategy. Smoke can season. Salt can sharpen. Time can soften. Hunger can make nearly anything persuasive, which is useful, though not exactly fair. The youngest child finally receives a softened piece of bread dipped in pot liquor. The liquid shines on the surface before disappearing into the crumb. The child eats with solemn focus, cheeks moving slowly. Someone wipes the child's chin with a thumb. A tiny moment, a whole world, outside. Thunder mutters again, but no one turns. Supper has become more interesting than the sky's complaints. You notice how the meal organises the cabin without anyone commanding it. The strongest hands move the heavy pot. The quickest child fetches what is needed. The person with the best place by the fire watches the bread. The oldest person is served with respect. The smallest are monitored closely. This order has grown from repetition, kinship, necessity, and the deep human wish to make something decent from limited means. A soft hum begins near the wall. Not a full song, not yet. More like a thread of sound, woven under the conversation. Another voice joins for a line, then drops away. The tune might come from church, from work, from memory carried across generations, or from all those places at once. In the 1830s, enslaved communities in Georgia lived within a world of forced Christianity, African inheritance, and evolving spiritual expression. Music often moved among those currents, carrying feeling where speech had to be careful. The rain gives cover to the hum. It blurs the edges, making the sound feel private. You sense why singing might rise around food. Both restore breath. Both gather people. Both say, quietly. The day did not consume everything. A spoon scrapes the pot, and the hum pauses. Practical matters win again. The last portions must be divided. Even music respects hunger, at least when it has manners. The pot is tilted slightly so the remaining broth can be reached. Someone jokes that the bottom has finally decided to appear. Another says the bottom always appears when the food becomes most interesting. The room exhales a small laugh. It is not loud. It does not need to be. Laughter in such a space works like a pinch of seasoning. Too little and the night grows flat. Too much and someone may wonder why spirits are so high. Balance, always. After eating, bowls are wiped, stacked, and set aside. Nothing is wasted if it can be helped. A little broth remains for someone who may wake hungry. A crust is wrapped. The spoon is cleaned and placed where morning hands will find it. Domestic order continues even when the body longs to collapse. You feel the ache of that discipline. Rest must be prepared before it can be entered. Even sleep requires labour. The fire is fed again, but not extravagantly. Wood must last. A thick piece is placed near the back of the hearth, where it will smoulder slowly. Sparks leap up, then sink. The cabin smells warmer now, full of cooked food and damp wool drying. Bellies are not full in the rich sense, but they are quieter. The room has changed. Supper has taken the sharp edge from the evening. You hold the empty bowl a moment longer, feeling heat fade from the wood. Your hands remember its shape. Around you, people settle into smaller motions. A child leans against a shoulder. A woman ties the food cloth. A man wipes his knife and slips it safely away. The old woman closes her eyes. Not sleeping yet, simply resting behind her own face. Rain surrounds the cabin with 1,000 soft taps. The meal leaves behind more than taste. It leaves traces of cooperation, humour, grief, skill, and endurance. It shows how enslaved people used the narrow hours after sunset to nourish bodies that the plantation treated as tools. Here, near the hearth, the body becomes human again. It receives warmth. It receives food. It It receives a voice saying, "Take this, have more, save some, pass it along." Small phrases, large meanings. The storm continues its patient work over the roof. Inside, the air grows heavier and calmer. Supper's drawn everyone into a shared circle, not free from hardship, but briefly steadier against it. You breathe in smoke, greens, corn, wet pine, and cooling iron. The taste of salt lingers on your lips. The fire glows low beneath the pot, and the cabin settles into the deep quiet that follows eating. When even thunder seems to speak from farther away, you remain near the fire as the room shifts from eating into the quieter work of being together. Bowls have been set aside, hands have been wiped, and the first heaviness of supper has begun to settle in the body. Outside, the storm moves over the quarters with long sighs of rain. Inside, the hearth draws every face toward its reddish centre, as if the flames are gently counting everyone present. The firelight changes people. It softens the tired lines around mouths. It deepens the shadows under cheekbones. It turns plain cloth golden for a moment, which is generous, since the cloth has asked for very little. You watch the flames move across the cabin walls, touching the clay seams and pine logs with restless colour. The room seems to breathe in orange and brown. Every spark feels alive, then gone. A woman draws a child closer and begins working fingers through the child's hair. The gesture is careful, practical, and tender at once. She separates small sections, smoothing, checking, perhaps braiding. Hair care in enslaved communities often carried both necessity and cultural memory, especially when time was limited and privacy scarce. It could be grooming, comfort, identity, and family attention all in one. A comb, when available, was not a small thing. Neither was patience. The child complains softly when a knot catches. The woman clicks her tongue and says the knot should have asked permission before moving in. Someone nearby laughs under their breath. The child tries not to smile, because dignity is important when your hair has betrayed you. The woman's hands continue their work, gentle but firm. Firelight shines along her knuckles, revealing the rhythm of care repeated across countless evenings. Near the opposite wall, a man turns a piece of cord between his fingers. He's been repairing it for some tool or bundle, though his attention now moves between the work and the voices around him. His hands rarely stop. Many people in the cabin keep working even while resting. A strap is mended, a stocking is patched, a wooden handle is smoothed. Rest, here, often wears the disguise of another task, yet the emotional centre of the room has changed. Work has loosened into presence. People sit not merely to recover strength, but to be known by one another. A glance passes between adults when thunder shudders over the roof. A hand reaches to steady a pothook. Someone shifts closer to block a draft from a younger child. These movements are small, but they form a language. You begin to understand the grammar. The hearth gives light, but it also gives a boundary. Beyond its glow, the doorway remains dark. Beyond the doorway, the courtyard lies wet and uncertain. The plantation world does not vanish because night has come. It waits in the distance, in rules, in buildings, in names spoken carefully or not at all. So the room's warmth must share space with watchfulness. Comfort keeps one eye open. A mainstream historical fact sits quietly beneath this gathering. Enslaved families and communities across Georgia often built kin networks despite sale, forced movement, and legal denial of their marriages. They formed bonds through blood, marriage customs, godparenting, shared childcare, and chosen relations. The law might refuse to honour those ties, but people honoured them anyway. Sometimes the most radical thing in a room is a person calling another person family. You hear that in how names are used. A child is called by a nickname that makes everyone smile. An older woman is addressed with respect that may or may not match blood relation. A young man receives a teasing title that suggests both affection and mild disappointment. Such naming maps the social world inside the quarters. It says who belongs where, who is trusted, who needs watching, who has earned the right to scold. The rain grows lighter for several breaths, and the space outside becomes audible. Water drips from the eaves. Frogs begin their bold little sermon from a ditch. A mule stamps somewhere in the dark, perhaps still offended by existence. Then a distant sound carries across the wet yard. It may be a door, it may be a branch. Every adult in the cabin hears it. The conversation thins instantly. No one panics, that is important. Panic wastes strength. Instead, eyes lift. A hand pauses above a child's hair. The man with the cord turns his head slightly. The old woman by the hearth stops rubbing her wrist. In a world where patrols, overseers, and sudden demands could intrude, listening was a practiced skill. Night did not guarantee privacy. It only lowered the light. The sound does not return. Rain resumes, softening the yard again. Slowly, the room lets breath back into itself. The woman's fingers continue through the child's hair. The man resumes twisting the cord. A child whispers a question and is answered with a look, which is unfairly efficient. Adults have always enjoyed using eyebrows as entire paragraphs. You feel the watchfulness remain, though. It has not left the room. It has simply folded itself beneath ordinary motions. This is what makes the firelight complicated. It gathers people into warmth, but it also lights their faces if the door opens. It helps hands sew and eyes meet, but it cannot choose who may see from outside. Even comfort has risks. Even light must be managed. Someone rises to adjust the door covering. A piece of rough cloth is drawn more securely against a gap. The room darkens slightly, becoming more enclosed. The fire now feels less like a lamp and more like a secret. Smoke drifts low for a moment, carrying the bitter smell of green wood. You blink against it, and your eyes water again. The cabin accepts your discomfort without apology. It has endured worse guests than smoke-stung eyelids. A young woman begins speaking about a baby born in another cabin some weeks past. Her voice is low, but warmth enters it. The baby arrived before sunrise, apparently impatient and not interested in anyone's schedule. A few people smile. Birth in the quarters carried danger, hope, and community labour together. Midwives and experienced women often held essential knowledge about childbirth, herbs, nursing, and care. That knowledge rarely appears properly in formal records, because formal records had poor manners about women's work. A quirky tidbit rests in the discussion of babies and storms. In many rural traditions, people believed children born during thunder might grow strong, restless, or touched by unusual fortune. Beliefs differed widely, and nobody needed a printed rulebook to enjoy an opinion. Someone in the room says storm-born babies cry louder because they learn from the sky. Another person says all babies cry like weather. This is difficult to dispute. The old woman opens one eye and says a baby has never yet asked whether people were ready. That earns the largest laugh of the evening. It is still soft, controlled, and short, but it carries real pleasure. You feel it move around the room like warmth from the hearth. Laughter does not erase fear. It puts fear in its place for a moment. Fear hates that. Very rude to fear, and entirely deserved. The child having their hair tended has grown drowsy. Their head dips forward, and the woman steadies it with 2 fingers. The fire shows the texture of the child's hair, the curve of the ear, the loose thread at the shoulder seam. These details matter because history is made of bodies, not just laws and crop yields. A sleepy child leaning into a mother's knee is also history. A repaired sleeve is history. A laugh swallowed before it gets too loud is history. The man with the cord begins telling a brief memory from his own childhood. He speaks of a night when rain filled every rut in the yard, and the children floated chips of wood like boats. He remembers one chip painted with berry juice, which everyone declared a grand vessel. It sank almost immediately. Apparently, naval engineering was not the group's strongest field. The room enjoys this failure. Safe failures make good stories. His memory carries more than amusement. It reminds everyone that children create play even where adults see mud and hardship. In quarters across the South, children worked early, watched younger siblings, carried water, tended animals, and ran errands. Yet they also played with sticks, stones, seeds, scraps, songs, and imagination. Childhood under slavery was constrained and vulnerable, but not empty. People were never only victims of their conditions. A boy asks whether the little boat had a name. The man thinks with unnecessary seriousness. Then he says it was probably named after someone who talked too much and floated poorly. The boy understands he is being teased and accepts the insult with noble suffering. More smiles appear. The storm's voice lowers behind the laughter, as if listening too. The old woman begins rubbing something between her fingers. It may be a bead, a button, or a seed polished by touch. She holds it while watching the fire. You notice that others do not ask about it. Some objects are allowed to remain private. In a place where so little privacy exists, silence can be a gift. The fire catches the tiny object once, then lets it disappear again in her palm. Historians still argue about how much emotional life inside quarters can be reconstructed from surviving evidence. Written sources often came from enslavers, travellers, officials, or later interviews shaped by memory and circumstance. Archaeology can reveal food remains, pottery, beads, tools, and cabin layouts. But love, irritation, bedtime teasing, and careful silences are harder to document. Harder does not mean absent. It means you listen with humility. The storm gives another low roll, and this time no one startles. It feels farther away, moving across fields, woods, and swollen creeks. The fire settles into a deeper glow. The woman finishes the child's hair, tying it with a strip of cloth. The child touches the finished braid with sleepy satisfaction. A small success. The kind that survives the night because someone's hands cared enough to make order. A man near the door checks the latch once more. His movement is brief and casual, yet the room understands. He does not want the door loose in wind. He also wants to know it will resist an unexpected push. The latch is only wood and iron, not certainty. Still, hands feel better after checking something. Humans have always liked pretending one good latch can reason with the world. From another cabin, a faint voice drifts through the rain. It may be singing, praying, or simply calling to someone. The sound is too blurred to separate. Your body hears it as distance made gentle. The quarters are not one household, but they are not isolated either. Each cabin has its own griefs and habits, yet voices travel between them. Firelight lives in several windows. A community glows in pieces. Someone begins a quiet prayer, not formal enough to command the room, yet clear enough to gather it. The words are simple: protection through the night, strength for children, mercy for those far away. The prayer does not need polished language. It needs breath, belief, and listeners. Some bow their heads. Some look into the fire. Some continue working with their hands. Devotion can sit beside mending without feeling insulted. Christianity among enslaved communities in the South was complex, shaped by forced instruction, personal faith, African traditions, and independent interpretation. Plantation owners often preferred messages of obedience, naturally, because power enjoys hearing itself preached. Enslaved worshippers could hear other meanings: deliverance, endurance, judgment, and a God who saw the lowly. The same scripture could sound very different depending on who held the whip and who held the hope. The prayer fades, but its quiet remains. Rain fills the space where words were. You feel the fire's warmth against your knees and the cool draft along your back. The room is not peaceful in a simple way. It is alert, layered, and alive. Its tenderness has edges. Its safety has conditions. Its love has learned to whisper. The old woman finally speaks, her voice dry and low. She says the storm will pass when it finishes telling its business. No one argues with this excellent meteorology. The child with the newly tied hair has fallen asleep against the woman's lap. The man with the cord knots his repair and tests it once. The door holds against the wet wind. The fire brightens when a coal breaks open, showing a red heart inside the ash. You sit within the circle and feel how kinship is made moment by moment, not by grand declarations, but by shared food, repaired cloth, guarded doors, remembered names, gentle teasing, and watchful silence. The plantation may deny legal bonds, but it cannot fully prevent people from becoming necessary to one another. That necessity hums beneath the rain. It is quiet, but not weak. The hearth throws one last high flame before sinking lower, for a breath. Every face is lit together, old and young, tired and listening, amused and worried, present. Then the light softens again, and the room returns to shadowed warmth. Outside, water drips from the roof in patient lines. Inside, family and chosen family hold the night close, not perfectly safe, but carefully guarded by firelight, memory, and one another's breathing. You sit within the dim cabin as the storm changes its voice again. The rain is no longer steady and polite. It begins to surge in wild sheets, sweeping across the yard and striking the roof with sudden force. Thunder rises from far off, travels through the dark, and arrives above the quarters with a heavy, rolling strength. The fire shivers in its own draught, sending long shadows up the walls. This is the hour when belief feels very near, not because anyone is foolish, not because the night is simple. Belief comes close because darkness, weather, fear, memory, and longing all share the same room. The storm turns the world outside into flashes and sounds, each one asking for meaning. Human beings are excellent at meaning, sometimes too excellent. Honestly, a cracked branch becomes a warning. A blue spark becomes a sign. Lightning fills the gaps around the door. For one white moment, the cloth covering seems almost transparent. Then darkness returns, thick and soft. A child wakes, confused by the thunder, and pulls closer to the nearest warm body. Someone whispers that the Lord is watching. Someone else murmurs that old trees complain when the wind pulls at them. Neither answer cancels the other. In this room, explanations sit together, not always neatly, but patiently. The spiritual world of enslaved Georgia in 1835 could not be folded into one tidy shape. Many people heard Christian preaching, attended plantation services, or gathered in more private worship when possible. At the same time, memories and practices rooted in West and Central African traditions survived in altered forms. Ideas about ancestors, spirits, signs, charms, dreams, and sacred power travelled through families and communities. They changed, but they did not simply disappear. You feel that mixture in the way people respond to thunder. No one gives a lecture. The room does not become a schoolhouse, and thank goodness, because no sleepy listener requested a chalkboard during a storm. Instead, belief appears through gestures. A woman touches 2 fingers to her chest before reaching for a child. An older man glances toward the doorway, then toward the hearth. A small cloth bundle above the lintel sways lightly whenever wind pushes through the cracks. The bundle may contain nothing more mysterious than herbs. It may hold a scrap of cloth, a root, a bit of hair, a few grains, a shell, or something known only to the hand that tied it. Protective bundles, charms, and spiritually charged objects appear in many cultures, including African American folk traditions. Yet the exact meaning of such an item in any one cabin is difficult to know. Scholars still debate how to interpret these finds when archaeology uncovers them without the voices that once explained them. A strange little quiet follows one clap of thunder. It is not silence exactly. Rain keeps falling. The fire keeps breathing, but the people pause as if the air is tightened. Then the old woman speaks. She says thunder is not always angry. Sometimes it is only clearing the road. Her tone makes the idea sound both spiritual and practical, which is a powerful combination. Roads do need clearing. So do hearts. Though hearts are worse at drainage. The child asks what road thunder uses. A young man answers that it takes the sky road, which is why it never gets stuck in mud. This seems unfair to everyone who has ever owned feet. The child considers this with deep seriousness. Then the child asks whether lightning walks faster. A few faces brighten. The question is good. The answer is obvious. Lightning is rude and runs ahead. The room relaxes into this playful theology. Still, beneath the humour lies older fear. Thunderstorms in wooden cabins could be dangerous. Lightning might strike trees, barns, fences, chimneys, or open ground. Flooded paths could become treacherous. Roof leaks could worsen. Fires could smoke badly in shifting wind. The weather was not decoration. It could damage shelter, animals, crops, and bodies. Awe and caution belong together. Rainwater begins to drip through another seam overhead. Someone moves a small vessel beneath it. The new drip joins the older rhythm, making an uneven pattern. Plink, pause, plink, plink. The old woman looks at the ceiling with disapproval, as if the roof has failed a moral test. In fairness, it has. The storm continues outside, unashamed. Weather has never been known for accountability. A man near the hearth takes a pinch of ash and rubs it between his fingers. He watches the grey dust cling to his skin. Ash can clean, mark, preserve, and remind. In some traditions, hearth ash carried household meaning because it came from the central fire. It was ordinary and powerful at once. You do not know whether he intends anything spiritual. Perhaps he simply has soot on his hand. History often hides in that uncertainty. The room's talk turns to dreams. Someone says a dream during thunder carries stronger meaning. Someone else says dreams after heavy supper carry stronger nonsense. This produces a soft laugh from the adults. Dreams mattered in many enslaved communities, as they mattered across much of the 19th century world. A dream might warn, comfort, reveal news, or bring the presence of someone far away. In places where letters were restricted and travel was controlled, dreaming could feel like another road. A young woman describes dreaming of clear water running uphill. She does not explain whether it frightened or comforted her. The old man says water knows paths people do not. Another person says uphill water sounds like extra work, and surely there is enough of that already. The cabin smiles in fragments. The dream remains open, bright and strange inside the smoky air. You notice how carefully people speak about certain matters. They do not say everything directly. They circle, suggest, pause, and let listeners understand. In a world of surveillance, speech develops its own weather. Some thoughts move like rain, soft and everywhere. Others strike like lightning, brief and dangerous. Belief gives people ways to speak about trouble without naming every threat. Spirits, signs, dreams, and storms can carry meanings too heavy for plain daylight. The fire lowers, and someone adds a split stick. It catches slowly, sending out the smell of resin and wet bark. The flame turns blue for one instant near the wood, then orange. A child gasps at the colour. An adult says the fire is licking the storm from the stick. That explanation is not found in any science book, but it is extremely satisfying. You almost prefer it. Sleepy minds are allowed small luxuries. There is a quirky belief, whispered in many places, that certain woods burn with particular moods. Pine flares bright and fast, oak holds longer, cedar smells sweet and sharp. People sometimes linked wood, smoke, herbs, and household luck in ways that mixed observation with charm. A fragrant branch might freshen a room. A certain smoke might discourage insects. A certain practice might also calm the mind. Practical medicine and spiritual comfort were often neighbours. Another flash lights the cabin, and for a heartbeat the faces look carved from silver. The old woman's closed eyelids shine. The child's eyes widen. The man by the door becomes a dark outline against pale cloth. Then the thunder follows, close enough to press against your ribs. You feel it, not just hear it. Your skin tightens. The floor seems to answer with a faint tremble. Someone begins humming, very low. The tune has a slow rise, then a falling turn that feels like a sigh. It may be connected to a hymn, or it may belong to older musical memory. Enslaved spiritual life often used call, response, repetition, and layered meaning. Though exact forms varied across time and place, songs could soothe children, strengthen workers, hide messages, praise God, mourn separation, or hold memories of home places never seen by the young. A song can carry many baskets. The hum deepens when another voice enters. No one sings loudly. The storm provides enough volume for the whole plantation. Really. The voices stay near the fire, woven through rain and smoke. You feel the sound in your chest before you follow its melody. It steadies the room. Even the children listen differently. The tune gives shape to fear, and shaped fear is easier to hold. A prayer follows the humming, spoken by a man whose voice is barely above the rain. He asks for keeping through the night, for mercy on distant kin, for strength beneath hard hands, and for safe sleep under the storm. His words draw from Christian language, but the feeling in the room is older than any one church. People have always asked the unseen to guard the doorway. People have always spoken into darkness and hoped something kind was listening. The prayer does not erase the charms, dreams, or storm sayings. They remain in the cabin like other objects, each holding a place. This blending was not confusion. It was survival, creativity, and inheritance moving under pressure. Plantation owners often tried to shape religious life toward obedience, but enslaved people interpreted faith through their own suffering and hopes. A promise of deliverance sounds different when heard by people in chains. Power rarely controls meaning completely. The old man tells a brief tale about a traveller who ignored a whisper from the trees. The traveller hurried through a storm, proud as a rooster wearing shoes. Naturally, this ended poorly, though not gruesomely. He lost his way, circled the same stump until morning, and arrived home with mud up to his knees and humility up to his chin. The children enjoy the rooster part most. Adults enjoy the humility. Stories like this do gentle work. They entertain, warn, and teach without scolding directly. They tell children to listen, respect signs, avoid arrogance, and stay near trusted people when the weather turns strange. They also make the night less frightening by giving it rules. A storm with rules is less terrible than a storm without them. Even imaginary rules help the heart breathe. The rain begins to beat from a different direction. Wind finds the sidewall now, pressing water through some narrow places. A cool mist touches your cheek. The fire pops in answer. You smell wet clay and smoke mingling sharply. Someone pulls a child's blanket away from the damp wall. Another person moves a basket higher. The spiritual talk does not stop practical action. Nobody here confuses faith with letting everything get soaked. A sudden knock sounds from outside. Not a fist, just a branch striking the wall in the wind. The adults freeze for one breath, then release. The old woman mutters that trees should learn manners before visiting. This earns another low laugh. Your body notices the laughter comes a little later this time. Fear has slowed it. The room is honest that way. It never pretends courage means a quiet pulse. Historians continue to question how private religious gatherings and quarters were organised in different regions during the 1830s. Some enslavers allowed supervised worship, while others feared independent meetings. Some communities gathered secretly in woods, cabins, ravines, or praise houses when possible. Evidence is scattered and shaped by repression. What remains clear is the hunger for spiritual expression. People sought God, ancestors, signs, and one another, even when watched. The storm offers a kind of covering sound. Rain hides whispers, thunder interrupts distant listening, wind scatters voices before they travel far. You sense why a night like this might allow stories or prayers that daylight would not welcome. Yet the same storm can also hide approaching footsteps. Every gift has a shadow. Every shelter has a crack. The old woman lifts her hand and touches the small object in her palm again. She begins to speak, not to the whole room exactly, but to the fire. She names someone gone. The name is soft, almost swallowed by rain. No one asks where the person went. Sold away, passed away, hired out, escaped, or simply absent for reasons too painful to unfold tonight. The name enters the room like another ember. It glows without flame. A child asks whether people far away can hear thunder at the same time. The question makes the adult still. The young woman answers that thunder travels wide when it wants to. Perhaps someone far away is hearing the same storm, or another one, or remembering rain from home. The child accepts this. You feel the comfort in it. Shared weather becomes a bridge, fragile but beautiful. Outside, the thunder finally begins to stretch farther apart. The storm is not gone, but its anger has loosened. Rain continues, softer now, tapping roof, yard, barrel, and leaves. The cabin feels changed by what has been spoken. Not safer in any absolute sense, but steadier. The unseen has been named, teased, questioned, sung to, prayed into, and folded back into the night. You sit with the smells of wet pine, hearth ash, damp clothing, and faint herbs warming near the fire. The air touches your face coolly where the wind enters, warmly where the flames breathe. The room glows low. The bundle above the door hangs still. The blue glass in the wall crack catches no lightning now, but you remember its small shine. Belief remains like that, quiet, until darkness gives it light. The people around you settle again, each carrying a private map of signs, prayers, memories, and doubts. The storm outside has not explained itself. Maybe storms never do. Maybe they only pass over human roofs, while people below make meaning from sound. In the cabin, thunder becomes warning, joke, road, drum, and distant voice. Fire becomes lamp, guard, witness, and companion. The night remains wide, but the circle near the hearth feels held by more than walls. You begin to notice the room preparing itself for sleep, though sleep does not arrive like a gentle guest with clean shoes. It must be arranged, coaxed, negotiated, and defended from cold draughts, damp bedding, coughing children, smoky air, and the stubborn ache left by work. The fire has lowered to a thick red glow. Shadows have grown larger. The cabin's corners deepen, and every object seems to settle into its night shape. A woman lifts a folded quilt from a chest and shakes it once, carefully, so dust does not rise too much. The quilt is patched from many pieces, each one a small survivor: brown wool, faded blue cotton, a strip of checked cloth, a bit of old dress fabric, all joined by stitches that have crossed many tired evenings. The quilt does not match itself, which is sensible. Matching is a luxury. Warmth is the real ambition. You touch one corner when it's passed near you. The fabric feels worn thin in places and lumpy where repairs overlap. Some patches are softer than others, One seam is rough enough to scratch your wrist, yet the weight of it is comforting, especially as the rain cools the walls. Quilts and coverlets in cabins like this were often made, repaired, and remade from whatever cloth could be spared. Textile care was a constant labour, mostly quiet, never truly finished. Near the bed frame, someone loosens a straw tick, a simple mattress stuffed with straw, corn shucks, moss, or similar filling. It gives off a dry, grassy smell mixed with human warmth and smoke. When shaken, it rustles loudly, as if full of tiny opinions. The sound makes a child giggle, then yawn. The tick is not soft by modern standards. Modern standards, however, have become extremely spoiled and pillow-obsessed. This bed is doing difficult work with humble materials. A mainstream historical fact sits beneath this bedding. Enslaved people's sleeping arrangements varied widely, but many slept on rough beds, straw mattresses, pallets, benches, or directly on floors. Household size, plantation wealth, age, health, and status shaped who slept where. Some cabins were crowded with families and unrelated people together. Privacy was limited. Comfort depended on materials, season, and the ability to repair what wore out. You watch sleeping places unfold from the room itself. A bench becomes a child's narrow resting spot. A rolled cloth becomes a pillow. A pallet is spread near the hearth, but not too close, because sparks do not respect dreams. Another pallet is placed along the wall where the draught is weaker. The floor must be red like weather. Warm here, damp there, too smoky by the chimney, too exposed near the door, too crowded everywhere. Naturally, the youngest children are arranged first. This seems universal, older than empires and more practical than most laws. One child is lifted while already half asleep, arms loose around an adult neck. Another resists with noble determination for 3 seconds, then collapses into bedding. Their small bodies fit where adults cannot. A folded coat cushions one head, a cloth roll supports another. Someone tucks cold feet beneath the quilt with firm kindness. The room lowers its voice further. Work tools are moved away from sleeping bodies. A pot is shifted so no one knocks it in darkness. The fire is banked with ash, leaving enough heat for the night while reducing flame. Banking a fire is a skill of thrift and safety. Too much air, and wood burns away too quickly, too little. And morning begins with a dead hearth and irritation. Nobody needs irritation before sunrise. Dawn already brings enough. You feel the air change as people stop moving around so much. Warmth collects near the floor in uneven pockets. The smell of bedding rises as quilts open. Cloth holds the day inside it. Sweat, smoke, rain, soap if there was any, and the faint sourness of hard-used garments. There is nothing decorative about these smells. They are intimate and plain. They remind you that sleep belongs to bodies, not paintings. A young woman removes a damp outer garment and hangs it near the hearth. Far enough from sparks. Steam lifts from the cloth in faint threads. Her shoulders relax when the wet weight leaves her. Beneath it, her shirt clings coolly to her skin. She rubs her arms briskly, then reaches for a dry wrap. The fabric scratches slightly as it settles around her. Dry cloth after rain can feel like mercy, even when it is coarse. The old woman receives a place where the floor is least damp and the draught least cruel. No one announces this kindness. It simply happens. Her knees bend slowly, and 2 younger hands help without fuss. She lowers herself with a breath that sounds almost like a complaint, though perhaps it is only the body telling the truth. Age in such a world deserves ceremony, but usually receives practical assistance. Practical assistance will have to serve. A child asks whether the thunder will come inside. The answer is no, but it is given softly, not mockingly. Children's fears are not silly just because adults know larger fears. A hand pats the quilt. Another voice says the fire will keep the dark busy. That answer is better than no. It gives the child a picture. The dark, apparently, has tasks to attend to. Good. Let it be occupied. Sleep in these quarters is not merely rest. It is repair under pressure. Bodies worked by forced labour need sleep urgently, yet conditions make sleep fragile. Noise, crowding, illness, weather, anxiety, and early rising all shape the night. Enslaved people often had to rise before daylight for field work or domestic labour. Rest was necessary, but never fully their own. Even dreams could be interrupted by command. Historians still debate how to understand the emotional experience of sleep under slavery, because the evidence is deeply uneven. Plantation records may mention cabins, rations, or work schedules, but rarely describe how a child curled against a parent, or how fear shaped breathing at midnight. Later narratives offer precious insight, but memory, trauma, and interviewer influence must be considered. The truth lies in careful fragments. A pallet can become evidence. A remembered blanket can become testimony. The man near the door stretches out on a narrow pallet, still close enough to hear the latch. His position is not accidental. Someone must be nearest the entrance. Someone must wait quickly if a sound changes. You notice his hand rests where it can reach a stick, tool, or simply the door itself. Protection in this room is limited, but the wish to protect is strong. Sometimes the wish is all that can fit between the wall and the law. A quirky sleeping belief moves through the room when someone turns a shoe away from the bed. In many folk traditions, shoes, brooms, knives, mirrors, and thresholds carried special meanings at night. A shoe placed wrongly might invite wandering dreams. A broom near a door might discourage unwanted forces. Beliefs changed from place to place, and people could hold them lightly or seriously. Still, at bedtime, even skeptics sometimes become polite to superstition. Why argue with a shoe after dark? The child who asked about thunder watches the shoe being moved. The child seems satisfied. Practical measures and magical measures look similar when you are small. Both involve adults moving objects with confidence. A blanket is pulled higher. The child's eyelids fall, rise, fall again. Rain continues its steady language above the roof. The fire shifts, and red light pulses across the sleeping faces. You find your own place near the side of the room, not quite warm, not quite cold. The floor beneath the pallet is hard, even through cloth and straw. Your hip discovers this immediately and files a formal complaint. You adjust, turning slightly, drawing your knees closer. The bedding rustles beneath you. A faint prick of straw touches your ankle. The quilt smells of smoke and old cotton. You pull it up to your shoulder. The cabin feels different when seen from lying down. The ceiling seems lower. The hearth looks larger. The door becomes more important. The hanging shadows stretch strangely across the roof beams. You hear breathing more clearly now. One person breathes through the nose with a soft whistle. Another sighs every few moments. A child mutters a word from a dream. Someone coughs and turns away from the smoke. Illness often lived close to sleep in quarters like these. Damp cabins, poor ventilation, crowding, exhausting labour, and inadequate food could worsen sickness. Coughs, fevers, aching joints, and injuries did not politely wait for convenient hours. Night might bring a chance to tend them. A cloth is dampened, a chest is rubbed, a foot is wrapped. Care happened in the margins, when the day finally stopped demanding hands elsewhere. You hear a woman whisper to someone whose cough has returned. Her words are low and soothing. She may offer water, herbs, or simply attention. The smell of something dried and bitter rises when she opens a small packet. Many enslaved communities held knowledge of plant remedies. Some learned from African traditions, indigenous knowledge, European practices, and local experimentation. Not every remedy worked, of course, but neither did every doctor, and doctors charged more. The cough settles after a while. The room seems relieved, though no one says so. Sleep creeps nearer. Rain softens to a fine, even patter. The wind no longer presses so hard against the walls. The fire has become a bed of coals with a thin blue smoke moving upward. The air is cooler now. You tuck your hand beneath the quilt and feel your fingers warm slowly against your ribs. In the darkness, thoughts become louder. You wonder how people found deep sleep with so much uncertainty around them. Perhaps exhaustion pulled them under before worry could finish speaking. Perhaps community made sleep possible, because others listened while you drifted. Perhaps dreams opened small doors where waking life closed them. None of these answers is complete. All of them may be partly true. A sleeper nearby turns, and the floor gives a small dry sound. Another person murmurs, then settles. The old woman's breathing becomes slow and textured. The child's breath flutters lightly, then evens. The man by the door remains awake longer than most. You cannot see his eyes clearly, but you sense the angle of his head. He listens to the yard, frogs, drips, far thunder, a loose shutter somewhere. Nothing urgent, at least for this breath. You feel the rough weave beneath your cheek. The cloth scratches, then becomes familiar. Your body begins making peace with the hard floor. Warmth gathers where the quilt traps it. Cold lingers along your exposed ear. The smell of smoke enters your hair and clothing, settling in as if it owns a long lease. Perhaps it does. In this cabin, smoke is not a visitor. It is practically a relative. The night deepens, and the room becomes a layered thing of sounds. Rain on roof, water in bowls, breath in corners, cold settling, straw shifting, a distant animal calling once, then no more. The sounds do not make silence impossible. They make a kind of living quiet. True silence would feel unnatural here. This quiet has company in it. You close your eyes, but the fire remains visible through your lids as a dull red softness. Sleep approaches slowly. It does not erase the plantation beyond the walls. It does not mend injustice. It does not promise morning will be kind. Yet for a little while, the body insists on its oldest right, to rest, to curl toward warmth, to be covered, to drift near other breathing people while rain keeps speaking overhead. The cabin settles around you with all its fragile arrangements. Quilts hold heat, pallets hold tired limbs. The banked fire holds the memory of flame. Watchful ears hold the edge of the dark. Somewhere above, the roof gathers rain and lets some of it through, one patient drop at a time. You lie still beneath the smoky cloth, feeling the hard earth below and human warmth nearby. Sleep, imperfect and precious, begins to take the room in its careful hands. You lie in the dark and begin to hear the world beyond the cabin wall with unusual sharpness. Sight has little work left to do. The fire is low, the corners are folded into shadow, and the room has become a landscape of breathing. So your ears take command. They sort the night patiently, separating the soft, the near, the distant, and the troubling. Listening becomes a kind of map. Rain falls from the roof edge in uneven streams. Some drops strike the ground with a thick sound, landing in mud already beaten soft. Others hit the rain barrel outside, making a hollow, rounded note. The barrel answers differently each time, depending on how full it has become. You can almost hear the water level rising. A practical mind might be glad for that water. A sleepy mind mostly thinks, yes, very impressive. Please be quieter. From the ditch beyond the path, frogs begin calling with full confidence. They have waited out the hardest thunder, and now they reclaim the night. One voice starts, then another answers, then many overlap until the wet dark seems stitched with sound. Their calls are not delicate. They pulse, croak, rasp, and swell. It is a whole wet choir with no conductor, and absolutely no concern for human rest. In rural Georgia, The nighttime soundscape around plantation quarters would have included insects, frogs, livestock, dogs, wind in trees, and human movement between cabins. The exact mixture depended on season, weather, crop fields, water sources, and the layout of the plantation. Sound mattered because it carried information. A familiar animal call could soothe. An unfamiliar footstep could tighten every muscle in the room. You hear livestock shifting somewhere past the cabins. A mule gives a low, irritated breath. A horse stamps in mud or against a stable floor. Chickens, disturbed by the storm, rustle and complain faintly from their roosts. Animals do not understand that night is supposed to be dignified. They rearrange themselves, mutter, scratch, and remind everyone that living bodies rarely stay still for long. Their noises are ordinary. Ordinary is welcome. Then comes the creak of wood from another cabin. It may be a door opening. It may be someone stepping onto a wet threshold. The sound travels through rain, softened but recognizable. A voice whispers a name. Another voice answers, barely louder than the dripping eaves. You feel the man near the door stir. He is awake enough to listen, not alarmed enough to rise. The room waits with him for a breath. The sound passes. Perhaps someone has gone to check a child, carry water, tend a sick person, or speak quietly where walls are thin. Night movement in the quarters could be innocent, necessary, tender, or risky. Plantation authorities often tried to regulate enslaved people's movement, especially after dark. Passes, patrols, and punishments shaped the geography of night. Yet people still moved, because life does not fit inside rules made by others. A dog barks far off, once, then twice. The second bark is longer and less certain. You feel the change in the room before you understand it. A sleeper shifts. Someone's breathing catches. Dogs could mean many things. Some harmless, some not. A passing animal, a stranger, a patrol, a person moving without permission. In this world, the bark of a dog can be a small sound with a large shadow. No one speaks. The rain continues. The frogs continue, shamelessly committed to their performance. The dog does not bark again. Slowly, the room releases itself. A child sighs and turns under a quilt. The old woman's breath remains steady. The man by the door settles back, though not fully. You realize that watchfulness does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is a person lying still with one ear sharpened against the dark. A mainstream historical fact presses into this. Listening. Slave patrols existed across much of the South, including Georgia, to monitor enslaved people, restrict movement, suppress gatherings, and enforce the racial order. Their activity varied by locality and moment, but the threat shaped daily and nightly life. For people in the quarters, sounds outside could never be only sounds. They might carry power, danger, or news. The cabin wall beside you feels cool against your shoulder. Through a narrow crack, wind pushes a thread of damp air. It smells of mud, wet leaves, animal hide, and the raw green scent that rises when rain bruises plants. Somewhere nearby, pine branches drip steadily. The forest edge is not silent either. Leaves patter, limbs rub together. Water falls from one branch to another in delayed little showers. A quirky tidbit belongs to these night sounds. In many rural traditions, certain animal cries were treated as omens. An owl near a house might be heard as a warning. A dog howling could suggest death, spirits, or strangers. A rooster crowing at the wrong hour could unsettle a household. Of course, animals have their own reasons, most of them involving hunger, territory, confusion, or theatrical self-importance. Still, at night, omens have excellent posture. An owl calls from the tree line. The sound is low and hollow, drifting through the rain like a question. A child half wakes and murmurs something. An adult answers softly that it is only a night bird. Only, the word tries to make the sound smaller, but the room listens anyway. The owl calls again, farther off now or perhaps turned away. Its voice fades into dripping leaves. People in the cabin may not all agree about what the owl means. Some may dismiss it. Some may quietly dislike hearing it near the quarters. Some may remember stories in which owls carried messages between worlds. Enslaved communities were not identical in belief, any more than any community is identical. A room can hold skepticism, fear, faith, and humour at once. Human minds are crowded little cabins themselves. You hear the rain barrel overflow. The sound changes from hollow notes to splashing spillover. Water runs down the side and hits the ground in a steady stream. Tomorrow, the yard may be deeply muddy, and the path to work will cling to ankles. That thought sits heavily, then drifts away. Night has enough weight without borrowing the morning's mud too early. A distant metallic sound reaches the cabin. It may be a chain at a gate, a loose hinge, a tool shifting in the wind, or something moved by a person. The man near the door lifts his head fully now. Another adult opens their eyes. The room becomes awake without becoming loud. This is a talent learned by necessity. Children sleep through it if luck allows. Adults listen for the next sound. Nothing follows for several long breaths. Then wind pushes rain against the wall, and the cabin answers with a creak. The metallic sound does not return. Someone lets out air slowly. You feel your own chest ease. Fear has not arrived, but its possibility has visited. That is enough to leave a mark. Historians still argue over how often patrol activity directly disturbed quarter life on ordinary nights, because local enforcement varied and records are incomplete. Laws reveal what authorities wanted to control, while personal accounts reveal fear, evasion, and enforcement in lived experience. The gap between law and nightly practice is difficult to measure, yet the emotional effect of possible intrusion was real. A sound could summon the whole system into the room. Beyond the quarters, the plantation's working spaces also make noise. Barn timbers cool and shift. A gate knocks faintly in the wind. Harness leather creaks where it hangs. A wagon tongue may settle under its own weight. Tools left under a shed click or scrape when gusts enter. These are the sounds of labour sleeping, though not kindly. Even at rest, the plantation's objects wait for bodies to use them again. You imagine the fields lying dark under the rain. Cotton plants, if planted in their season, drink and bend. The soil softens. Rows blur. Ditches fill. The land receives the storm without caring who claims ownership on paper. That is a quiet irony, almost too large to hold. The earth knows rain, roots, worms, and footsteps. It does not know legal documents. Humans invented those, and then acted very impressed with themselves. A soft snore rises from near the hearth, then stops abruptly when the sleeper shifts. Someone else whispers a sleepy correction, perhaps telling the snorer to turn. The snorer obeys without fully waking. This small domestic negotiation lightens the room. Danger may live outside, but so does absurdity inside. Even under oppression, someone can snore with unnecessary confidence. The frogs surge louder, as if responding to the snore. Their chorus fills the spaces between raindrops. You notice different pitches now. Deep throats near the ditch, higher chirps farther out, a dry clicking insect beneath the wall, a long buzzing thread from somewhere near the roof line. The storm has not silenced the living world, it has tuned it differently. Insects would have been constant companions in warm Georgia weather. Mosquitoes, gnats, fleas, lice, and biting flies could make rest miserable, especially in crowded or damp conditions. Fire smoke sometimes helped discourage insects, though it brought its own discomfort. Bedding, clothing, and bodies required constant attention. Sleep was not only interrupted by fear, sometimes it was defeated by a flea with a grand sense of purpose. You feel a tiny itch at your wrist and resist scratching loudly. The quilt traps warmth around you, but it also traps every small sensation. Straw pricks your leg, damp air cools your nose, smoke roughens your throat, a mosquito whines near your ear, that most ancient and disrespectful lullaby. You wave it away beneath the covers, it returns, because mosquitoes are philosophers of persistence. A rustle comes from the cabin corner. Not human, too small. A mouse, perhaps, exploring crumbs or warmth. Someone hears it and whispers a mild threat toward the darkness. The mouse, unmoved by legal language, continues briefly, then disappears. Food storage in cabins required constant vigilance. Grains, meal, scraps, and seeds drew rodents and insects. A lidded pot, a hanging bag, or a tightly woven basket mattered greatly. The storm has made every creature seek shelter. People, animals, insects, mice, all under roofs, leaves, burrows, rafters, and scraps. The world is crowded with need. You feel less alone, though not exactly comforted. Shared discomfort is not the same as justice. Still, there is something strangely calming in knowing that the night is full of bodies waiting for rain to pass. A faint human song drifts from another cabin. It comes and goes with the wind. The words cannot be understood, but the shape is tender, perhaps a lullaby or prayer. The sound crosses the wet yard like a small lantern. No one inside comments. The song is allowed to travel without being caught. It joins the frogs, the dripping roof, the breathing room, and the low coals. The quarters become an instrument made of many shelters. You think about how sound can connect people who cannot safely gather. A voice through rain says someone else is awake. A cough nearby says someone may need care. A child crying tells another cabin that birth, sickness, fear, or hunger is present. A laugh through a wall can lift spirits without crossing a threshold. Sound moves where bodies may be restricted. It disobeys distance quietly. The man by the door finally lowers his head again. His hand remains near the latch, but his breathing slows. The danger he was listening for has not taken shape. Not tonight. Not in this moment. The cabin returns more fully to sleep. Though the outside world keeps speaking, you sense that rest here is never a sealed room. It is a thin cover beneath a sky of noises. The rain becomes lighter, more like fingers than pebbles. The barrel outside drips from its rim. Frogs settle into a slower rhythm. The owl does not call again. Far away. Something wooden knocks twice, then stills. You let each sound pass through you without chasing it. The night map remains, but its lines soften. Yard, ditch, stable, trees, road, neighbouring cabins, door, fire, breath. You lie beneath the quilt and feel listening turn into drifting. Your mind holds the sounds lightly now. Rain on roof, animals in mud, voices in fragments, watchers breathing, insects testing patience. The plantation beyond the wall remains present, but the dark has spread its thick cloth over every shape. The cabin does not become silent, it becomes familiar, and in that familiarity, fragile as it is, sleep finds another narrow path. You notice the cabin's hidden life most clearly when the room has grown nearly still. The boldest things have already announced themselves: the hearth, the bedding, the doorway, the rain. Now the smaller things begin to appear. A cord tied in a careful knot, a scrap of red cloth tucked beneath a sleeping mat, a smooth stone near the wall, a folded paper shape, if paper can be found at all, hidden where curious eyes might not look. These objects do not speak loudly. They survive by not speaking loudly, in a world where nearly everything can be inspected, counted, taken, or questioned. Small private things become precious. You feel this as your gaze travels slowly around the low room. What seems like clutter at noon may become meaning at midnight. What seems ordinary to a stranger may hold the weight of a whole life. A woman reaches into a basket and removes a bit of thread wound around a sliver of wood. She checks it by firelight, then returns it carefully. Thread is not dramatic, but drama rarely mends a shirt. Thread holds seams together. It closes tears. It turns cloth scraps into coverings. It extends the life of garments that have already served too long. In enslaved quarters, mending was more than housekeeping. It was survival stitched into visible form. You watch her tuck the thread away beneath a folded rag. The motion is quick and practiced. Possessions here may need to be hidden from children, rats, damp, theft, or authority. A needle could be treasured, a good button could matter, a scrap of cloth might become a patch, a tie, a doll, a charm, or padding for a bruised heel. The future of an object remains open when nothing can be wasted. A mainstream historical fact rests inside these small economies. Enslaved people in the American South often created informal networks of exchange, craft, and mutual aid within and around plantation communities. They might trade produce, repair goods, make baskets, sew, carve, cook, hunt, or exchange services when conditions allowed. Such activity varied by plantation and region, but it helped people gain small measures of resourcefulness inside severe limits. The plantation system tried to define people as labour. The quarters quietly refused that definition. Not in a grand speech, because grand speeches are difficult when someone might be listening. Instead, refusal lived in smaller forms. A mother saving a ribbon for a child. A man carving a handle that fits his own palm. A young person learning a song not approved by anyone with power. A family keeping a name alive. Near the hearth sits a small object made from corncob and cloth. At first it looks like nothing, just scraps pushed together. Then you see it has a shape, a child's toy, perhaps a doll, with a tied head and loose body. Its face is not marked, but the child who owns it likely knows exactly who it is. Toys like this rarely survive in records, because history has a terrible habit of overlooking play. Children, fortunately, rarely ask permission to imagine. The doll lies near a sleeping child's hand. One cloth arm has come loose, and someone has tied it back with string. The repair is clumsy, but affectionate. You can almost hear the owner's argument that the doll is perfectly fine and not to be judged. Quite right. Many of us are also tied together imperfectly and hoping no one comments. The little object holds tenderness without needing to be beautiful. A quirky tidbit appears in the use of hidden pins. Across various folk traditions, pins could be practical tools and protective objects. A pin placed in cloth might mend a tear, secure a garment, fasten a packet, or carry a whispered purpose. Some people believed sharp metal could discourage harmful influences. Others simply knew pins were useful and easy to lose. Both truths can sit together in one tiny point. You see a pin tucked through a folded strip of cloth above the chest. It catches a coal's glow for one brief moment. Perhaps it is only being stored safely. Perhaps it has a meaning no outsider would guess. Historians still debate how to interpret spiritually suggestive objects found at sites associated with enslaved life. A bead, coin, shell, blade, or pierced object may be protective, decorative, personal, practical, or all at once. Meaning often depends on memory that was never written down. The room's hidden comforts are not only objects. Some are patterns of action. A woman shifts slightly so her body blocks a draught from a child. A man shares a warmer place without drawing attention to the gift. An older child curls around a younger one, half asleep but still protective. These are quiet acts of care, almost invisible unless you are looking gently. They do not remove oppression. They deny it the final word. The rain outside has thinned into a misty tapping. You hear water slipping from roof to earth, then from earth into small channels. The cabin smells of banked coals, wet wool, clay, and the faint sweetness of stored roots. Someone has placed dried herbs on a high shelf, where smoke and warmth keep them from dampness. Their scent is subtle, bitter green beneath ash. Herbs may serve the cooking pot, the sick bed, the prayer, or all three. A young man reaches behind a loose board and retrieves something wrapped in cloth. He opens it only enough to check the contents. You glimpse a small carved piece of wood, darkened by handling. It might be part of a tool, a keepsake, a charm, or a gift. He touches it once with his thumb and hides it again. The action is private, but not secret from everyone. Some privacy is protected by shared refusal to stare. This restraint matters. In crowded living, manners become a form of architecture. People build invisible walls with averted eyes, lowered voices, and careful timing. You do not ask what is in the bundle. No one else asks either. Questions can be loving, but so can silence. The cabin understands this better than many large houses do. A mansion may have many rooms and very little tact. A small cabin may have almost no rooms and remarkable discretion. You sense another kind of defiance in the songs kept low. A young woman, not fully asleep, mouths words without sound. Her lips move in a pattern familiar to her body. Maybe it is a hymn, maybe a work song, maybe a fragment learned from an elder. Songs in enslaved communities could hold faith, sorrow, coded meaning, humour, rhythm for labour, and memory across generations. A song held inside the mouth is still a song. Music did not need an audience to matter. A hummed line could steady a hand. A remembered chorus could connect a person to someone far away. A rhythm tapped against a knee could turn waiting into endurance. Authorities might attempt to control gatherings, drums, travel, worship, and noise, but sound is difficult to imprison completely. Even silence can keep rhythm inside the chest. The fire cracks softly, and a coal falls inward. Red light spreads across the floor, revealing faint marks in the packed earth. Scratches, heel marks, a child's line drawn and erased. The groove where a stool leg has been dragged again and again. The floor is a record. Though not a neat one, it remembers traffic more than names. It holds the pattern of daily movement, the map of bodies within limited space. Archaeologists studying quarters often find broken ceramics, glass beads, buttons, nails, food remains, tobacco pipes, tools, and personal items. Such finds can reveal consumption, craft, trade, belief, and daily life. Yet every discovery also reminds you of what does not survive. Breath does not fossilize. A joke leaves no shard. A lullaby usually vanishes unless someone carries it onward. The quietest histories require patient imagination joined to evidence. You notice a pipe stem near the hearth, set aside where it will not be crushed. Tobacco pipes were common in many 19th century sites, including enslaved quarters. Smoking could be relaxation, habit, social exchange, or a brief private pleasure. A pipe might pass between people, or belong to one person with great seriousness. Humans can become oddly loyal to small comforts. A pipe, a cup, a stool, a song. Tiny kingdoms. A man picks up the pipe stem, checks it, then puts it down again. Perhaps the tobacco's gone. Perhaps the hour is too late. The smell of old smoke already fills the cabin enough. He rubs his thumb along the stem as if thinking through it. Then he closes his eyes. Even the unfinished desire for a smoke becomes part of the room's quiet economy. Not every comfort can be used whenever one wants. Near the door, the cloth bundle above the frame hangs motionless now. It has become part of the doorway's shape. Thresholds often carried meaning in many traditions, because they mark the line between inside and outside, known and unknown, household and world. A threshold could be swept, guarded, blessed, avoided, or crossed with care. Here, the doorway is practical and symbolic at once. It keeps out weather badly, danger uncertainly, and meaning very well. You feel how the quarters contain both surveillance and secrecy. Cabins stand where others can see them. Paths link them to work, kitchens, yards, barns, fields, and authority. Yet inside these cabins, people create hidden pockets of life, a seed saved for planting, a word taught quietly, a relative's name spoken with care, a plan held behind the eyes. These things may seem small because they had to be small. Smallness helped them survive. A seed packet lies beneath a shelf, wrapped against damp. It may hold beans, peppers, gourds, or something medicinal. Garden plots, when allowed or tolerated, could provide food, flavour, remedies, and goods for exchange. They also offered knowledge passed through hands. Planting is a patient form of hope. It says the future may reach this soil, despite everything arranged against it. Seeds are unreasonable that way, admirably unreasonable. The smell of earth enters through the wall cracks, freshened by rain. It mingles with the idea of planting, with the memory of hands in dirt for more than forced labour. There is a difference between a field commanded by another and a small patch tended for one's own people. Both may ache the back. Only one can carry even a narrow feeling of choice. The difference is not small to the person bending there. A child in sleep pulls the little cloth doll closer. The gesture is automatic, soft, and deeply human. Nearby. The older woman's fingers loosen around her small, polished object. It rests against her palm, half visible in the glow. The young man by the wall has hidden his carved piece again. The woman's thread sleeps in its basket. The pin remains in folded cloth. The cabin keeps its secrets with the seriousness of a trusted friend. You listen to the room and sense defiance without noise. No shout, no banner, no heroic pose lit by lightning for dramatic effect. Just private care, continued memory, objects saved, skills practiced, names protected, children comforted, beliefs adapted, food stretched, songs carried. People were meant to be reduced to labour, but they kept making households, meanings, jokes, remedies, and futures. That is not small. It only looks small from far away. The storm has nearly passed into fine rain. The fire is low enough that the cabin seems made more of shadow than wood. Yet each hidden thing feels warmer now that you have noticed it. The tiny doll, the tucked thread, the seed packet, the quiet charm, the repaired quilt, the remembered song. None of them can undo the plantation's violence, but each says that inward life remains. Each says that people continue to belong to themselves in ways power cannot fully reach. You settle deeper beneath the smoky cloth and let your eyes close. Around you, the cabin holds its private world. Damp walls, banked coals, sleeping bodies, hidden keepsakes, and all the careful smallness that keeps a spirit from being swallowed. Outside. Water slips down the dark paths between cabins. Inside. Warmth gathers around what has been saved. The night becomes quieter, and the hidden comforts keep their watch without needing to be seen. You wake into the grey edge of morning, though waking is not quite the right word. It is more like surfacing from a shallow place where sleep never fully covered you. The cabin remains dim, and for a moment the night seems unfinished. Rain has become a fine mist beyond the walls. The fire is nearly hidden under ash. The air is cool enough to touch your face with damp fingers. No one speaks at first. The room is full of the careful stillness that arrives before labour claims the body again. Breath moves beneath quilts and thin coverings. A child sleeps with one arm thrown across a cloth bundle. The old woman lies curled on her side, her knees drawn up, her face turned toward the hearth. The man near the door is already awake. Perhaps he never slept deeply. Some people rest like doors on loose hinges. The first sound is a rooster, far too confident for such an hour. He calls from somewhere beyond the yard, announcing dawn as if he personally invented it. Another rooster answers from a distance, equally impressed with himself. The cabin stirs. Someone sighs with the sorrow of a person who hoped morning had forgotten the address. Morning has not. Morning is very punctual when work is waiting. The air smells different now. Night smoke has cooled into a flatter scent, mixed with wet clay, ashes, damp bedding, and the faint sourness of soaked earth. The rain has washed the dust from the yard, leaving everything raw and open. Through a crack near the door, you see pale light gathering on mud. Not golden light, not poetic light, a practical grey. Wet light that says the world is still here, and so are its demands. A woman pushes herself upright slowly, pressing one hand to her lower back. Her movement is careful, not because she is old, but because yesterday still lives in her muscles. Another adult sits up and rubs both eyes with the heels of their hands. A child rolls away from the cold air, trying to hide beneath a covering. This plan is ancient and respectable. It also fails. A gentle hand finds the child's shoulder. In Georgia plantation life during the 1830s, enslaved field workers often rose before full daylight to begin the long demands of the day. Work rhythms varied by season, crop, weather, and plantation management. But early rising was common, storm or no storm. The labour system expected bodies to appear. Rain might change tasks, delay some field work, or create new chores. It rarely created true rest. You sit up and feel the stiffness immediately. The floor has given you sleep, but it has kept comfort for itself. Your hip aches. Your shoulder complains. Straw has left small impressions against your skin. The quilt slides away, and cool air enters around your neck. You pull your knees closer for one extra breath. It is not laziness, it is negotiation. The morning wins anyway. Near the hearth, a woman kneels to wake the fire. She moves ash aside with an iron tool, searching for a living coal. The sound is soft, gritty, intimate. Ash shifts. A red point appears, dull but alive. She bends close and blows carefully. The ember brightens, then dims, then brightens again. A shred of dry bark is added, then another. Smoke rises before flame, because smoke enjoys arriving early and making itself noticed. The first flame catches weakly. It licks the bark, retreats, then returns with more confidence. Someone places a small piece of wood near it. The cabin receives a little light. Faces appear slowly from shadow. Eyes blink. A child coughs once. The old woman murmurs something that might be prayer, complaint, or both. Many mornings begin with mixed theology. Banking embers through the night was a practical skill because rekindling a dead hearth could cost precious time. Matches were not always available or cheap in every setting, and fire-making required dry tinder, sparks, or borrowed flame. A living coal meant continuity. It meant last night had carried something useful into morning. You watch the coal become flame and understand why such a small glow deserves respect. A quirky morning belief touches the room when someone warns a child not to step over another person's legs while they rise. In some folk traditions, stepping over someone could stunt growth, invite bad luck, or require stepping back to undo the trouble. The child, half awake and deeply unimpressed, reverses direction with exaggerated seriousness. Adults enjoy this more than they admit. Superstition is sometimes a way to teach careful movement in crowded rooms. Very clever, really. The cabin begins to unfold into work. Bedding is shaken, folded, rolled, or pushed aside. The straw tick is smoothed with quick palms. A quilt is hung briefly near warmth to drive away damp. Sleeping places vanish back into daytime shapes. Floor space returns. A stool is pulled upright. A pot is checked. A tool is found beneath a cloth. The room transforms without ceremony, because ceremony takes time and nobody has enough. A child is dressed with efficient tenderness. One sleeve resists. A foot misses the proper opening. Hair is smoothed with wet fingers. A small face is wiped clean enough for the day, though the day will not keep it clean. Another child whimpers at the cold touch of water. The adult says the water is not cold, which is a bold statement unsupported by evidence. The child recognizes the propaganda but submits. Outside, the yard is a shining mess. Mud gathers in low places, reflecting the grey sky in broken patches. Footpaths have softened into slippery channels. The rain barrel is full, its sides dark and slick. Water drips from the eaves in steady lines. Smoke from several cabins rises low, flattened by damp air. The quarters are waking in pieces. A door opens, a cough carries. Someone calls a name. A baby begins to cry with impressive commitment. The smell of morning food enters the room faintly, cornmeal stirred with water, perhaps leftover broth warmed again, perhaps nothing more than a small piece saved from supper. Breakfast, when there is one, is practical and fast. The body needs fuel, but the schedule is not kind. A woman breaks a piece of bread and hands it to a young person, who eats while tying something at the waist. Multitasking is not a modern invention. It is just less glamorous with cold fingers. You step toward the doorway and feel mud before you fully see it. It sucks lightly at your soul, as if the earth would like to keep you home. A tempting offer. The air outside is wet and cool. Mist clings low over the courtyard, softening cabin edges and turning distant trees into grey shapes. Pine needles shine with water. The ditch runs brown and quick. Every surface seems rinsed, except the labour waiting beyond it. The fields lie past the quarters, hidden partly by mist. Cotton culture in Georgia depended on relentless labour, especially as demand for cotton expanded across the South. By 1835, cotton had become deeply tied to the region's economy and to the forced labour of enslaved people. Weather shaped agricultural work, but it did not soften the system's hunger. Rain could delay picking, hoeing, or planting tasks. Yet it could also mean ditching, repairing, hauling, tending animals, or work closer to buildings. A man tests the ground with his foot and gives a low sound of disapproval. The mud answers by holding him in place a moment too long. Someone says the field will try to steal his shoes. Another replies that the field can have the shoes if it will do the work too. The joke is tired but useful. Morning humour has a hard job. It must function before the mind is properly lit. Historians continue to question how weather interruptions affected daily routines on individual plantations, because records often emphasize production rather than lived experience. A plantation journal might note rain, crop condition, or delayed work, while saying little about wet feet, cold hands, and aching bodies leaving the quarters. Weather was recorded as management information. For enslaved people, it was felt through clothing, skin, hunger, timing, and fatigue. Back inside, the fire has strengthened enough to warm a small pot. Steam lifts from water or thin porridge. The sound of stirring joins the morning chorus. Metal against pot, cloth being shaken, feet on packed earth, children whispering, adults giving brief instructions. No one has the luxury of a slow awakening, yet every movement still carries human texture. A hand rests briefly on a shoulder. A scarf is retied. A crust is saved for later. The old woman remains near the hearth, not because she is idle, but because her tasks may begin differently. She sought something in her lap, perhaps cloth, herbs, or small items needing repair. Age, illness, skill, and plantation demands all shaped labour assignments. Some older enslaved people cared for children, cooked, mended, tended gardens, watched fires, or performed lighter tasks when allowed. Others were still forced into heavy labour far beyond mercy. The system did not become gentle because a back grew bent. She looks toward the door and studies the wet yard. Her face holds no surprise. Weather has been doing this longer than anyone. She tells a child to mind the puddles near the chopping block because they are deeper than they look. The child nods solemnly. then immediately steps in one. Water splashes up the leg. The old woman closes her eyes, not in prayer this time. In professional disappointment, the cabin brightens by degrees. Grey light fills the upper walls, the firelight fades in comparison, though its warmth remains dear. Objects that seemed mysterious at night become practical again. The basket is a basket. The pin is a pin. The bundle above the door is just a bundle, unless it is not. Morning does not remove meanings. It covers them with tasks. The hidden life retreats politely, waiting for another dim hour. You notice how quickly the room's emotional temperature changes. The closeness of night gives way to the outward pull of obligation. People speak less softly now, though still carefully. The yard requires attention. The day's assignments must be met. Children must be placed where they belong. Food must be secured. Wet clothing must be managed. The body must be convinced to move, despite having an excellent argument against it. A young woman wrings water from a cloth outside the doorway. The sound is sharp and twisting. Drops fall into mud already crowded with water. Her fingers redden in the chill morning air. She shakes the cloth once, then hangs it over a line or peg beneath shelter. It will not dry quickly today. Dampness will travel with everyone. It will sit in hems, sleeves, cuffs, and hair. The storm has left gifts nobody asked for. The quarters grow louder. A baby cries from another cabin, then quiets. Someone chops kindling with quick, controlled strikes. A door slams when wind catches it, followed by a scolding voice aimed at no person in particular. A dog trots through the yard, nose low, inspecting puddles with great official seriousness. Chickens emerge cautiously, offended by wet ground but interested in whatever it reveals. Life resumes, mildly irritated and completely persistent. You take another bite of warmed cornbread, if a piece reaches you. It is firmer now, smoky and dry at the edge. The warmth helps. Food before work has a different feeling from food after work. It is not reward. It is preparation. It tells the body, you must go on. The body may not be persuaded emotionally, but it understands fuel. Sometimes understanding is enough. At the doorway, the man who slept near the latch looks out across the yard. Mist beads along his hair and shoulders. He listens, not for danger now, but for signals of the day beginning elsewhere. A bell, a call, a horn, a shouted order, or the simple movement of others might mark the transition. Plantations used different methods to organize labour, but the message was rarely subtle. Morning did not request attendance. It commanded it. The sky lightens behind the clouds. No clear sunrise appears, only a thinning of grey. The storm has moved away, leaving water in every hollow and heaviness in every limb. You feel the strange cruelty of a beautiful wet morning. The air is fresh. The pines smell clean. The mud shines. Birds begin to call from the tree line, bright and careless. The world can be lovely without being kind. History knows the contradiction well. People step from the cabin one by one. Feet find firmer places, then lose them. Skirts are lifted from mud. Trouser legs darken with wet clay. A child is passed to an older girl. A tool is taken up. A cloth bundle is tucked under an arm. The cabin empties gradually, losing warmth with each departing body. The fire remains, smaller now, tended for return or use by those staying near. You linger at the threshold and look back into the room. Bedding is folded. Ash rests around the hearth. A bowl sits under a leak, holding the night's patient water. The air still smells of smoke, damp cloth, and human closeness. In daylight, the cabin appears rougher, poorer, more exposed, yet it also appears strong in another way. It has carried people through storm, sleep, fear, hunger, and waking. That is no small work for clay and pine. Outside, the mud receives your step with a soft pull. Morning mist brushes your face. The quarters stretch around you, wet and stirring, every cabin releasing its people into the grey. The day waits beyond the yard, heavy and unavoidable. Still, somewhere behind you, the fire keeps a coal alive. Somewhere inside the damp room, hidden objects remain tucked in their places, and under the pale Georgia sky, endurance rises quietly, not rested enough, never free enough, but rising all the same. You remain near the quiet hearth as the day's first motions stretch beyond the cabin walls. The storm has travelled onward, leaving its wet fingerprints across the quarters, the paths, the fields, and the dark trunks of the pines. The thunder no longer rolls above you. It has become memory, a low shape in the mind, like something heard in a dream and nearly forgotten by morning. Inside the cabin, the fire is not finished. It has lowered itself into ash and ember, but its heat still breathes faintly when you lean close. A coal glows beneath a grey covering, red at the centre, patient as a hidden heart. The air above it trembles. Smoke rises in a thin blue thread, then disappears into the blackened throat of the chimney. The room smells of damp wood, old supper, wet clay, cooling iron, and sleep. The quarters outside have grown brighter, yet this cabin holds a little of the night. Shadows remain under the bed frame and behind the chest. Water still gathers in the bowl beneath the leak. A quilt edge rests where someone left it in haste. A small print of a child's heel marks the floor near the doorway. The room is nearly empty, but it is not vacant. Human presence lingers stubbornly, very stubbornly, perhaps beautifully so. You look at the hearthstones and see the marks of repeated use. Soot has built its dark skin over every surface. Ash has settled into small hollows. Bits of charred wood lie like broken letters no one can read directly. In plantation quarters, the hearth was often one of the most important household features, serving as kitchen, heater, light source, gathering place, and centre of domestic routine. A fire could turn a bare room into a living interior, yet the fire also tells a deeper story. It shows how people created continuity under conditions meant to fracture it. One evening's coals carried warmth into the next morning. One cooked meal became another small saved portion. One repaired garment served another season. One remembered song passed into another mouth. The plantation demanded repetition for profit. The people inside the quarters made repetition serve survival, family, and meaning. That difference glows quietly in the ash. A mainstream fact rests behind the scene around you. By 1835, Georgia's plantation economy was deeply tied to cotton cultivation and enslaved labour, especially as the cotton frontier expanded through the state. The wealth of enslavers depended on forced work, land, markets, and law. But those large systems were lived through very small places: a cabin floor, a wet threshold, a bowl beneath a leak, a coal kept alive through rain. You hear distant voices outside, thinned by mist. A child calls for someone and receives an answer from the yard. A dog splashes through mud, delighted by conditions everyone else considers regrettable. A rooster gives another proud announcement, because apparently one was not enough. Farther away, the sounds of work begin to gather. Wood struck by metal, a gate shifting, feet on wet ground. Human bodies moving toward orders they did not choose. Inside, the remaining warmth touches your hands. The roughness of the hearth edge presses against your palm. You feel grit from ash and clay. The texture is grounding, almost tender in its honesty. Nothing here pretends to be smooth. The cabin has no polished surfaces made for display. It offers worn things, smoked things, repaired things, hidden things, and useful things. History often survives exactly that way, not polished, but handled. A quirky detail sits in the grey ash itself. In many rural households, ash was not merely waste. It could be used in soap making, cleaning, garden work, pest discouragement, and sometimes in folk practices connected to protection or blessing. Hearth ash came from the household's own fire, which gave it a certain intimacy. Throwing it away carelessly would have seemed foolish to many people. Even ashes, apparently, had a career path. You imagine someone later gathering a portion of ash into a container, saving it for use. What modern eyes might call debris could become part of washing, planting, or household care. The same is true of scraps, bones, seeds, cloth, grease, and cord. The quarters were full of transformation, not magical in the storybook sense, though sometimes belief leaned near. Practical magic, perhaps. The kind made from hunger, skill, and refusal to waste. Historians continue to wrestle with how best to describe agency within enslaved life, without softening the brutality of slavery. Too much emphasis on endurance alone can accidentally make suffering seem bearable. Too much emphasis on oppression alone can hide creativity, relationship, and inner life. The truth requires balance and care. People were forced into violent conditions, and people still made worlds within them. Both facts must stand together. You let that balance settle in the quiet room. The cabin is neither a cozy refuge nor a symbol of misery only. It is a place where danger and tenderness slept close together, a place where children dreamed while adults listened, a place where food was stretched, prayers were whispered, jokes were risked, charms were hidden, and wet clothing steamed by the fire. It held fear, but not fear alone. It held warmth, but not freedom. The storm has left the walls darker in places. Moisture beads along one seam where clay has softened. A repair will be needed when time allows, and time rarely allows generously. Someone will press new clay into the gap, maybe with straw or moss, smoothing it by hand. The mark of fingers will remain for a while. Such repairs are intimate records of touch. A wall can remember care, even when no name is written there. Near the doorway, the little bundle remains above the frame. Daylight makes it plainer, but not less interesting. Cloth, twine, perhaps herbs or scraps. It does not explain itself, which is considerate, because not everything exists to satisfy a stranger. Its meaning belongs to those who placed it there. Perhaps it guarded the threshold. Perhaps it stored something useful. Perhaps both. In this world, usefulness and sacredness often shared a roof. A faint breeze enters through the door gap, carrying the scent of drenched grass and fresh mud. The air outside feels washed, almost new, though nothing essential has changed. That is one of weather's tricks. A storm can make the world smell reborn while the same hard order waits in the fields. Rain cleans leaves, not laws. Still, the freshness matters to the lungs. You breathe it in slowly, accepting what relief can be honestly taken. You think of the many quarters scattered across Georgia and the wider South, each with its own arrangement of cabins, paths, hearths, gardens, sounds, names, and sorrows. No single night can stand for all nights. No single cabin can hold every experience. Some quarters were harsher. Some had different building forms. Some communities were larger, smaller, more divided, more connected. History resists neatness. It prefers complicated shoes, usually covered in mud. Yet the human needs remain recognizable. Warmth, food, rest, kinship, privacy, meaning, safety, even if only partial. A voice in the dark, a hand checking the latch, a place to tuck a treasured object, a coal to carry through the night. These needs cross centuries, though the conditions around them can be brutally unequal. You feel that closeness and distance at once, and it makes the room very still. Outside, the mist begins to lift from the yard, cabin walls appear sharper, the path shines with water where feet have already passed, puddles hold pieces of pale sky, smoke drifts from another chimney, soft and low. Somewhere, a child laughs once, then is hushed toward a task. The sound is brief, but it opens the morning like a small window. Even labour's shadow cannot prevent every laugh. That must have annoyed the shadow. You look back at the embers. They are fading, but not gone. One coal breaks inward and shows red beneath grey. The movement is tiny, yet it feels like the whole night folding itself into a single point of light. Thunder, rain, stories, hunger, laughter, fear, prayer, sleep, waking, all gathered into one slow glow. The coal does not speak. It does not need to. Some witnesses are quiet because they have seen too much. The cabin's objects return to stillness. The bowl beneath the leak holds a little storm water. The stool leans with its familiar imbalance. The broom waits near the wall. The folded bedding keeps the warmth of bodies for a short while, then releases it. The little cloth toy rests near a corner, rescued from being stepped on by some careful hand. These things seem ordinary. They are ordinary. That is why they matter. Ordinary life under extraordinary cruelty is not a contradiction. It is the very texture of survival. People did not live as symbols. They woke with sore backs. They disliked wet socks. They teased children. They worried over food. They remembered the absent. They found a songline while working. They kept spiritual meanings private when privacy was scarce. They endured, not because endurance is pretty, but because life kept asking them to continue. You remain by the hearth a little longer. The ash cools slowly, the damp air moves over your face. Your fingers smell faintly of smoke when you lift them from the stone. Outside, morning broadens. The storm has gone from the sky, but the cabin has kept its lesson. Shelter can be fragile and real. Warmth can be partial and precious. A night can be full of fear and still contain care. The thunder that once filled the roof is gone now, leaving only water sounds and distant work. The fire is nearly asleep. The cabin rests between uses, waiting for hands, voices, hunger, repairs, and another evening. Its silence is not empty. It holds the memory of breath and rain. It holds the stubborn claim that people made a life here, within walls never designed for tenderness, and made tenderness anyway. Now the room grows softer in your mind. The edges blur a little. The mud outside becomes only a dark shine. The pines become tall, quiet shapes beyond the yard. The smoke rises thinner, lighter, almost blue against the morning grey. You let the sounds drift farther away. A rooster, a gate, a voice, a splash, a fading drip from the roof. Each one loosens and falls behind you. You breathe slowly beside the dying hearth. The coal is dim, but a little warmth remains. It is enough for your hands. Enough for this final quiet moment. The cabin, with its clay seams and smoky roof, seems to exhale around you. Not with ease, exactly, but with a tired steadiness. The storm has passed over it, and still it stands. The people who slept here have carried themselves into the day. Their footsteps mark the wet path. Their hidden things remain tucked away. Their laughter, prayers, and careful silences linger like smoke in the rafters. You do not take those things from them. You simply witness them, gently, and let them be. The fire lowers again. The red fades beneath grey. Rainwater slips once from the roof and lands in the soft mud outside. A bird calls from the trees, clear and small. The morning answers with mist. You feel your own thoughts grow quieter, as if they too are being covered with ash, kept warm somewhere below the surface. Let the cabin become dim now. Let the hearth become only a glow. Let the storm become distance, then memory, then sleep. The walls hold. The bowl waits. The quilt rests folded in shadow. The doorway opens toward wet light, but you remain inside the calm of the final ember. Your breathing slows with the room. In, like smoke rising. Out, like rain leaving the roof. The world beyond the quarters grows faint and far, softened by mist and time. Nothing more is needed from this moment. The fire has done its work. The night has told its story. The thunder has moved away, and you may drift now, gently and safely, into the hush left behind. Sleep well,